Chapter 1564. Holding Rock took the levitation crown and continued with Dafa. Fellow Daoist, you have seen the treasure and returned it to me. Strange Mountain has one more friend. So, who else is willing to be friends with Strange Mountain? You can also borrow it for a look. This old man will not favor one and discriminate against the other. This was a very generous proposal, and several cultivators were tempted, especially the cultivators on the other satellite. They were the kind of people who happened to be there at the right time, and they were more inclined towards the latter when it came to forcefully seizing the treasure or using it as a reference. A few cultivators were interested, and Stonewood chuckled. My treasure has a strange feature. It is nostalgic. Whoever it touched, it would be able to sense whether the cultivator who touched it had good intentions and whether they had the intention to snatch it away. If they had good intentions, the next time it would belong to whoever touched it, it would be guided by this person who had good intentions. So, fellow Daoist, who do you want to be friends with? Lu Xiaoyi pointed at a random person on the other satellite. The levitation crown was also magical. It flew straight to him, as if he was the owner. By now, Lu Xiaoyi had achieved his goal. He had experienced the power of space in the Ferris wheel and gained some benefits from Strange Mountain. He could have left like this. However, Holding Rock's behavior was very strange. Since he couldn't leave now, he might as well stay and watch the fun. One by one, the treasure was passed to another. Gradually, everyone was addicted to watching it. Because time was limited, it was impossible to study the treasure too deeply. Most people only analyzed the mechanism of the power of space. Everyone knew that if Holding Rock was willing to show it to others so Dafa, he must have a special control method. Therefore, no one was too serious about it. Who knew if this old man was digging a hole for them? In the end, the treasure was passed to He Qian. Behind him were Bai Guang and Zhang Jiang. However, after he saw the treasure, he assigned it to Holding Rock. This was a blatant provocation. Holding Rock also joined in the fun. After taking back the treasure, he put it in his arms and no longer lent it to others. No one knew if it was because he had discussed it with Anchor Chain or because they had a tacit understanding. The two thieves found that they had been tricked. After everyone present had seen the Void Departure Crown, who would give them a chance to cause chaos. A bandit should be straightforward in his actions. If he thought too much and considered too much, he would lose the meaning of being a bandit. Black Corpse Zhang Zhang's blood was boiling. He wanted to use force. It didn't matter whether he could snatch the treasure or not. What was important was how to vent his anger. But white light stopped him. Don't be angry. This is a trap set against us. I was wondering how the news about the Void Departure Crown got out, so it was done on purpose. Other than us, the people on this satellite are all from Strange Mountain, or they are the helpers they found. Just now, that individual customer deliberately spoke big words in an attempt to provoke us into attacking. We held back, but in the end, the first plan didn't work, so they came up with another plan. These two people deliberately humiliated us. This is the rhythm of wanting to take action in the dimensional space. We can't be at their mercy. It's not too difficult to deal with the 5 of them, but don't forget, there are 4 Supremes on the other satellite. Once we fight, the possibility of them hitting us when we're down is very high. Black Corpse Zhang Jiang took a deep breath. He had wandered the universe for thousands of years and had experienced all kinds of storms. To be able to survive until now under the encirclement of so many forces, it showed that these two were not boors who blindly fought for power. Divine Sense replied, "It makes sense. These guys are hypocrites. Since they lured us here, why don't they just surround us and kill us? They want to take off their pants to vent and find some so-called high-sounding reasons. They want to be righteous. They will never understand that what killed them was never the so-called strength, but this hypocrisy." The two reacted very quickly. Although it was not very accurate, they were aware of the danger they were in at the first moment. White Light chuckled. "We came so early and didn't even make it to the evening market. It seems that I was rash. Previously, I was biased in my suspicions about fellow Daoist Baosher, and I was not careful enough with my words. This is my fault. We only have ourselves to blame for being unable to see the treasure. Here, I sincerely apologize to you." Fortunately, it didn't cause any consequences, and we still have the chance to meet. Lu Xiaoi, who was watching from the side, immediately left when he heard this. To be honest, the bandit was not a bandit, and the senior was not a senior. It was like a crappy soap opera. If you want to rob, go ahead and do it. We have just entered the dimensional space and don't know the situation, so it's the right time to do it. Also, that old Taoist Baosher was not a kind person. No one knew what evil things he was hiding in the dark. It was better to stay away from such a cunning old man. He had received benefits from the strange mountain. Regarding the direction of the change of speed and Dafa's display of the treasure, although he might not be sincere, benefits were benefits. He was a person who clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred. Seeing him leave, the rest of the cultivators also left. At least, the cultivators on the other satellite left without hesitation. San Gui and Heqian looked at Baosher meaningfully, and the master and disciple also left together. They also felt that something was wrong. This old man seemed to be hiding something from them. After entering the dimensional space, everything seemed to be under someone's control. For cultivators like them, this feeling was very different. They were not kind people, and the way to get out of this situation was actually very simple. Just like the madman who saw the treasure, they just left and let the strange mountain man deal with the changes by himself. Life was worthless in the world of cultivation. No one would risk their life for you just because they saw a treasure, especially when they couldn't see through this old man. In the end, only the 2 bandits and the 5 people from the strange mountain were left. The 2 bandits were also confused. Their guess was obviously wrong. The madman and the master and disciple in front of them were not with the strange mountain. Then, where did Baosher's confidence come from? The 2 bandits approached with hideous smiles. Zhangjiang was very curious. He had too many questions. Old Baosher, I thought you set a trap to lure us into it. It turns out that these people are not with you at all. Baosher's expression didn't change. He smiled and said, Faceless manslaughters by Guang and Black Corpse Zhangjiang. Although you changed your appearance, I didn't mistake you, did I? Of course, this is a trap. It was from the moment you received the news. These years, you have caused a lot of trouble in the universe, including the strange mountain man. I have wanted to find you for a long time, but I didn't have the chance. This time is not a coincidence. I spent a lot of effort. Bai Guang said in a low voice, Oh? Then I want to know, how did you do it? Just the 3 of you? And there's even a lowly nascent soul stage cultivator? Baosher shrugged. I wanted to gather everyone to work together, but I didn't expect the fierce duo of black and white in the universe to admit defeat. One wrong move, and the whole game is lost. These ungrateful things, after receiving benefits from the old Taoist, ran away quickly. Fine, I admit defeat. The treasure will be my compensation, okay? Chapter 1565. P.S. My apologies for the late update. Seeing the void departure crown being thrown at him, Bai Guang was extremely cautious. They were all in the realm of monarchs, and were all 1,000-year-old foxes. If Lu Xiaoi and Anchor Chain could see that something was wrong with the old man, how could they not? He shouted, Second brother, don't touch the void departure crown. This old man is strange. Let's kill him first and talk later. The black and white fiends finally showed their usual fierceness and returned to their usual way of doing things. They grasped the crux of the problem and killed this old man first. Then, the rest would be easily solved. Baosher sneered, Do we need outside support to kill you too? We, the strange mountain man, are enough. Before he could finish speaking, the strange true monarch who had never spoken before had already dashed toward the 2 of them. In spirit, although not weak, dared to act brave in front of 2 senior primordial soul cultivators? If they couldn't kill him in 3 breaths, their thousands of years of cultivation would be in vain. Although they looked down on this in spirit, they were not careless at all. This was also the reason why they were able to survive until now. One on the left and one on the right. Although they hadn't worked together for hundreds of years, this didn't affect their tacit understanding. The strange in spirit was not afraid at all. It even dared to divide its power to block the 2. This was the stupidest way of fighting. Shouldn't it hide and fight one, and then wait for Bao Shi to help? But Bao Shi didn't have any intention of helping. He just stood there and watched the battle with a smile. Bai Guang sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. He couldn't be afraid to kill just because something was wrong, right? Thinking of this, the three people's techniques had already connected. How could the strange Ain spirit be a match for the two of them? There was already a gap between their realms. How could it fight against two people at the same time? As the black and white fiend's power hit the strange monarch, the two didn't expect it to be so simple. But in the next moment, something strange happened. The body of the strange Ain spirit shattered into light under the joint attack of the two. It didn't have a human body at all. It was like an energy creature. The destruction of this energy creature was pushed back in reverse in an instant, following the force of the two great bandits. This was a reversal that couldn't be avoided, because this wasn't some kind of real power, but rather the cover of the space of the unseen. The next moment, the two bandits disappeared without a trace. Only the levitation crown was left spinning in the void. Bao Shi waved his hand and retrieved the treasure. He turned to the dumbfounded Yan Li and said, "Why? Are you scared?" Yan Li was a little embarrassed. He was indeed afraid. The reputation of these two people in the dozens of nearby universes was too frightening. He was afraid that the three of them wouldn't be able to handle them because he didn't have any fighting ability in front of such ferocious and stubborn people. "No, I'm just worried about Martial Uncle," Bai Shi chuckled. There were some changes to the plan, but at least he managed to deal with it. Now that he was halfway to success, he was in a good mood and was willing to say a few more words. After all, it would be a great loss if there was no audience for such an exquisite assassination. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. If you're not strong enough, you should be afraid. Otherwise, if you continue to charge up, isn't that just courting death? The true strength of our strange mountain orthodoxy is indeed inferior to these two ferocious people, including your martial uncle. But what I want to tell you is that fighting isn't just about the size of a fist, it's more about wisdom. This is the foundation of man being the spirit of all things. Can your lifespan be compared to a spirit treasure? Can your body be compared to a demon beast? Can your soul be compared to a spirit body? We humans compete in wisdom. Yan Li still didn't quite understand. "Martial uncle, please speak slowly. My brain is still a little muddled." Bao Shi was a little proud. Even with his wisdom, he was still a little vain. This was also a human characteristic. "I brought the Sect's Holy Spirit, you know that. But what you don't know is that I've already merged the Sect's Holy Spirit and the levitation crown into one. So now, the Holy Spirit of our strange mountain can also be called the Spirit of Space." Yan Li nodded like a chick pecking rice. Of course, he knew that the silent monarch was the treasure of the strange mountain, the Holy Spirit, Ayuan. But he didn't know that his martial uncle was so bold that he dared to merge the Holy Spirit with his own space item. Although he was shocked, he wasn't stupid. He knew that now wasn't the time to be serious, and it wasn't his place to be serious about this kind of thing anyway. Bao Shi was still unsatisfied. The levitation crown's ability is not only to change the direction of space, it also has an important function, which is to create a space within a space. This function is useless in the normal main world. We can't capture enemies, so we have to enter a dimensional space to activate its function. Which dimensional space is the safest? It's not the one we built when we fought the ferocious people, but the one we built on the Ferris wheel. Only here, no one will think of being pulled into a space again. Only then can we capture these two ferocious people, do you understand? Yan Li somewhat understood. "I understand now. Then we can wear them down in the space." Bao Shi shook his head. "How can we wear them down? According to the rules of the heavenly Tao, an item's ability can't go against the heavens. You can catch people, but you can't wear them down and vice versa. So when they go in, besides not being able to come out, we can't do anything to them at all. Maybe they can live longer than us in there. Except for being lonely." Yan Li was a bit disappointed. This kind of trap can't make people feel at ease, but at least we got rid of two big evils for the nearby universe. "But Martial Uncle," Since the Holy Spirit now has such an ability, it seems that you could have directly attacked them when you first entered the dimensional space. Why do you have to go through so much trouble? If you let people look at them one by one, wouldn't it be terrible if they found out about the Holy Spirit's true strength? Or do you have other plans? This question was exactly what Bao Shi was itching to ask. He was also a good supporting actor. Hee, at least you have some brains, you're not that stupid. If we really keep these two fellows in there for hundreds or thousands of years, who can be assured that they won't think of a way to get out? And most importantly, the space inside the space can only exist in such a dimensional space. Once we leave the main world, the space will immediately shatter, and the two ferocious people will naturally escape. It would be strange if they don't come to our strange mountain to kill us. Yanli was a bit nervous. Martial uncle, then what should we do? Bao Shi was very proud. That's why your martial uncle, I, made such an unnecessary move the moment we entered the dimensional space. Not for anything else, but to create resentment. To make these people feel bad for each other. Then we'll gather them in the space and let them kill each other. The space can't wear them down, but they can wear each other down. Yan Li's eyes widened. You still want to pull people in? Bao Shi sneered. Of course. Why do you think I let them use the treasures? It's to let them leave their own space aura in the treasures, so that we can find them easily. When I find them, I'll send them in one by one, and there will be a good show to watch. Chapter 1566. P.S. My apologies for my late update. Yan Li was still a little worried. Uncle, these two are the most ferocious people in the surrounding universes. I've never heard of anyone who can surpass them in terms of power, let alone the two of them together. If you send them in one by one, don't send them all to their deaths. Huashi's heart was as hard as iron. So what? None of these guys are good people. They all deserve to die. But you don't have to worry too much. As far as I know, there are also strong people among them. For example, the master and the disciple are both strong people from the upper realm of the anchor chain. We can't find anyone to deal with the two murderers here, but if it's a strong person from the upper realm, then it's hard to say. Yan Li thought about it. The plan was indeed meticulous and flawless. Uncle, since the Holy Spirit has been brought into the space, how do those cultivators take them in? When the space didn't exist, the Holy Spirit could appear in the form of a human being, but if the space was occupied, it had to fuse with the void separation crown. It couldn't be separated for even the slightest bit in order to maximize the treasure's power, just like the scroll of Eternal River. Huashi laughed. That's why I gave each of them a chance to see the treasure. With this reason, it's easy to capture them. Just watch, there are still 9 people outside. The 2 Yuanying don't matter, but the 7 Supremes are enough for the black and white malevolent duo to deal with. Even if we can't kill them, we can still exhaust them. Let's just wait and see. Yan Li admired him from the bottom of his heart. His Uncle Master's plan was indeed a whimsical one, a work of the gods. Apart from the fact that it was like refining the treasures of the strange mountain town for personal use, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. If everyone did that, how could the orthodoxy continue? As if guessing his thoughts, Huashi glanced at him. You think I'm doing this for myself? If not for the few cultivators we lost a few years ago, would I take this risk? Those old guys in Strange Mountain don't want to make progress. They're all like cowards. How long will it take for them to come back for revenge? The murders are very clear. They just don't make a move. I'm so anxious. However, this treasure won't be mine in the future. Back then, the Holy Spirit was the public property of Strange Mountain. After fusing with the Void Crown, it's still the public property. It's just that I'm using it faster. Yan Li laughed dryly. How would I dare to doubt Martial Uncle? It's because of this series of changes that I'm feeling a little weak in the knees. Bao Shi waved his hand. What's there to be afraid of? It's not like we need to do anything. Find those people, approach them, and take out their treasures. They had just seen the void leaving crown, and now is the time to easily take it. Follow me closely and watch how I purge these evil creatures in the universe. Yan Li didn't dare to say too much because he was afraid that he would make a mistake. He was no longer a child. He had reached the realm of yuanying and was a very outstanding figure in Strange Mountain. Martial Uncle's method of carrying the stone was very amazing, but the strangeness of it couldn't be concealed no matter what. All of this sounded reasonable, but there were also many things that were wrong. For example, for such a big operation, why didn't he inform the monarchs in the mountains, but only the two of them, yuanying?
Why?
Was it really just the two of them who were outstanding? Or were there other unspeakable reasons? Other than the two beasts, were those people really evil beyond redemption? Were they robbers? Not necessarily, right? Why didn't they let them go? This was definitely not a coincidence, but a plan to pull a large number of people into the space. It didn't matter if these people coveted the treasures or not. The more Yenli thought about it, the more frightened he was, but he couldn't show any abnormalities on his face. Martial Uncle Bao Shi was the kind of cultivator who didn't have many friends in Strange Mountain. He was usually a loner who was obsessed with his own cultivation and research. He often heard from his teacher that this martial uncle was a little crazy, but he didn't take it seriously. Now it seemed that he was right. His only hope now was to quickly find junior sister Huijin. Her brain was more flexible than his, and she thought deeper. Or, in this case, it was best not to meet her. Following behind Bao Shi, Yenli's heart was in a mess. But with his status and ability, what could he do? Lu Xiaoyi was running at the front because he felt that it was boring. A group of people scheming against each other, each scheming against the other. It was annoying to watch. There were people like this everywhere, so he might as well focus on his own things. So far, he had only established a 1-yuan linear equation because he had only been thrown into the Ferris wheel once. There were still many variables to be solved in the acceleration and direction changes. He needed to be thrown into the Ferris wheel again and again in order to establish a multivariate equation until he could solve the final answer. Therefore, the most important thing for him now was to return to the main space, to the Ferris wheel, and to use the communication device a few more times. His research on the void corona wasn't useless, but it was focused on how to create a spatial direction change. When he solved his multidimensional equation and knew how to achieve a balance between acceleration and direction change, he would solve the next problem. How to use the change of speed through his escape ability. How to use the change of direction like the void corona. Step by step, he only had one goal. In the future, his sword escape would no longer be a pure escape through the main space, but an escape through the dimensional space. If he could achieve this, who would be able to catch him in the future? Who would be able to lock onto him with their divine sense? There would be no need to defend anymore. When he escaped into the dimensional space, all attacks would be ineffective. He was truly fearless.
Right now, he was experimenting.
He was experimenting on how to achieve a sudden change of speed like the Ferris wheel. Swordsmen were good at escaping. This was a characteristic of their orthodoxy. Lu Xiaoyi especially liked this method. It was something that was fused into their blood and could not be cut off. However, swordsmen's escaping technique didn't focus on the change of speed. They focused more on the sudden change of direction under high speed, and their whereabouts were unknown. The core of this technique was to prevent the opponent from predicting where they would land next, and to not be able to predict their movements in advance. However, this kind of escaping technique didn't change much in speed, because swordsmen always believed that speed was the only way to protect their lives. They wouldn't deliberately slow down in order to find a change of pace. Right now, he wanted to change the method of escaping that he had been familiar with for thousands of years. He wanted to slow down while he was moving, then speed up again. He wanted to find the feeling of changing speed between speed and speed. Changing speed wasn't a uniform speed, nor was it a uniform speed. Instead, it was a change of speed. Theoretical understanding and practical application were two different concepts. It wasn't just a test of his ability to increase speed, it was also a test of habit correction. However, under Lu Xiaoyi's persistence, he made rapid progress. This was because the cornerstone of his speed was Constellation's Tira. Chapter 1567. A cultivator's speed could be improved by countless Dao systems. Star ascension was one of the most advanced methods, But Lu Xiaoyi now felt the unparalleled advantage of star ascension in terms of speed and acceleration. This was because he could easily change the number of stars in his body to achieve the goal of increasing his speed. For example, he could now sense nearly 1,000,000 stars in the positive and negative space. If he originally used 100,000 stars to increase his speed, but suddenly changed it to 150,000 stars, this would provide him with increased speed. If the number of stars in his body was constantly changing from 100,000 to 150,000, then to 210,000, then to 340,000, this was the most standard form of acceleration. Not only was his speed constantly changing, even his acceleration was constantly changing. In the eyes of others, it was a completely unfathomable speed trace. Moreover, it was a speed that could be accurately controlled. The only thing that needed to be changed was his habit. This was because he was already used to a fixed number of stars in his body to control his speed. Now, he needed to multitask until it became an instinct. During his flight, he would constantly create demonic moths, just like how a child would walk. Sometimes he would run and sometimes he would jump into puddles of water and step on them. When this kind of childlike flying technique became an instinct, his flight would no longer be considered as flight, but as a cramp until he could pull himself into the dimensional space. Then, he would pull himself back and unleash a few swords, and the person would disappear. What could one do when faced with such a swordsman? The prospect was very wonderful, so Lu Xiaoyi was full of enthusiasm. This was because this was a breakthrough that would improve his swordsmanship ability. Even the Crow ancestor did not know this move. Lu Xiaoyi had a beautiful thought. In the future, he could also form his own lineage in Xianyuan. Kongqia lineage. Yes, he still needed to think about the name. It had to be grand, the kind that sounded amazing. In the process of flying, he also met other cultivators. They were not the batch that was thrown in from the 2 satellites, but the batch before that. The Ferris will open up a space of speed, so the cultivators would not be thrown into different spaces. Their destination was very clear, which was the 2-dimensional space. This was the cornerstone of the space theory. Space was continuous, not disorderly pieced together. If one wanted to go to the 3rd dimension, one could only go to the 2nd dimension based on the 2nd dimension. Therefore, the Ferris wheel in the 1st dimension could only throw people into the 2nd dimension. There was no possibility of throwing people into a different dimension. He could not get out because the Ferris will use the power of the celestial phenomenon to make the space barrier very thick, so he could not do anything. He had the theoretical knowledge, but his strength was not strong enough. When he saw the beautiful woman from Strange Mountain, Huaijin, she was entangled by 2 Yuanying and could not get away. Cultivators were not obsessed with women. This referred to most of the Great Tao. For some Yuanying from small worlds, small sects, or rogue cultivators, beautiful Yuanying female cultivators were a kind of resource, a rare resource. There were all kinds of birds in the forest, not to mention the huge cultivation world. There were always some kinds of weirdos who challenged the bottom line of human beings. In fact, Lu Xiaoyi's performance when he was observing the Void Crown was also one of the weirdos. The so-called entanglement was still very polite, it was just following. The Strange Mountain's reputation in the dozens of nearby universes was far from reaching the level of shock. In fact, in the nearby airspace, there was indeed no domain or force that could hold up the cauldron. The Ferris wheel attracted a lot of cultivators in the dozens of nearby universes. 100 Yuanying was not a big number, so it was normal that there were some good and bad people who came. Lu Xiaoyi slowly approached. He was not a nosy person, but the sect behind this woman gave him a very important enlightenment on the Tao of space. He knew how to repay it. He did not want to get involved with the old guy Huaishir, but he did not mind helping the little Yuanying who came from the same sect. It was just a little effort, so why not? When he got closer, he found that the 2 Yuanying were among the 9 people on the other satellite. They ran away in advance when they saw the situation was not good. This also explained why they dared to entangle the female cultivator from Strange Mountain. It was because they knew that the monarch of Strange Mountain was in trouble and could not get away. He did not have the desire to kill, and he was not a real butcher. He just flew over and said lightly, "Let's go. The big cultivator from the sect will be here soon." If you continue to entangle, I'm afraid you will not have a good ending." The two Yuanying did not say a word and turned to leave. This was a very common dispute in the cultivation world. They did not dare to say anything in front of a monarch. Lu Xiaoyi nodded slightly. He did not intend to get to know the woman. Although the woman was beautiful, there were countless beautiful women in the cultivation world. After the incident with Bai Hua, he reflected on his attitude and felt that it was not a good thing to be too indulgent in this aspect. The woman had something to say. "Senior, how are the senior brothers and elders of Strange Mountain? I came here early, so I don't know about their situation. Is it really like what the two people said, something bad happened?" Of course she knew this person. He was a traveler who stayed on the satellite with her for less than a month. He must know more about the situation than the two people. "It's okay. Your uncle is very capable. At least before I leave, it will be fine. Unless he is looking for trouble with others." The last sentence was a test, but the woman's face was blank. It seemed that she was also a disciple who did not know much. He was deeply wary of the old man. He was not afraid of those fierce and ruthless people in the universe, but he was afraid of this kind of kind grandfather-like figure, especially those who played with skills. When they went crazy, they did not care about the rules of fighting between cultivators. It was very troublesome. How could it be? Uncle has always been kind to people and focused on the Tao of space. He rarely participates in the affairs of the universe. Huai Jin defended her elder. She did not have any prejudice against this perfected cultivator, nor did she have any good or bad feelings towards him. She just felt that he was young and dared to roam the universe alone at the Een master level. She was very impressed with such a cultivator. "Senior, can you give me a general direction? Where is Uncle and the others? If you can, I will be very grateful." Lu Xiaoyi shook his head, determine the direction in the dimensional space. "It seems that your understanding of space is not enough. I have been flying all this time, and there are no stars to guide me, so I can't give you a specific direction. My opinion is that you should go on your own. If you are lucky, you will naturally meet them. Even if you are unlucky, you will only leave in a month. How can you lose them? Forgive me for being blunt, but if they are in trouble, you can't help them. Instead, you will cause trouble. If you are just thinking about your own safety, you can also follow me. At least no one will come to talk to you." After pausing, Lu Xiaoyi said meaningfully, "I think if you follow me, the possibility of meeting your elders here is higher." Chapter 1568. Lu Xiaoyi did not say this aimlessly. Based on his intuition, he always felt that something was going to happen in this dimensional space, as if it would not be perfect if something did not happen. It was just a feeling. It was not that he wanted to fly with a beauty, but he had long lost the mood he had when he first left Zhou Xian. After saying a few words, he did not care about what the woman thought and turned around to leave. He was still immersed in his understanding of space and speed. Huai Jin stood in place and thought for a while. In the end, she felt that this senior's words were reasonable. Showing off one's strength depended on the situation. Sometimes it was not necessary. Knowing how to measure the situation was the real self-esteem. Thus, she followed from afar and almost lost him. This was because this senior's flight path was very strange and completely unpredictable. Especially in terms of speed, it was very shocking. He could easily escape from her divine sense range in an instant. Fortunately, this senior wasn't trying to get rid of her on purpose, and his speed wasn't always very fast either. Thus, after losing it a few times, he was able to find it again. This forced her to get closer, and she understood the senior's true intentions. Obviously, he was trying to understand the effect of increasing speed on the dimensional space. This was because she could feel that this senior's speed change was similar to the speed change of the Ferris wheel. The ability of a perfected cultivator was not something she could guess, especially if it was a perfected cultivator from another orthodoxy. What left the deepest impression on her was that this senior's speed was really abnormal. Occasionally, he would increase his speed and escape from her divine sense, as if he was escaping from a mortal. Her speed was considered good in the cultivation world, but in front of this person, she was like a snail. Through changing one's speed to achieve the same effect as the Ferris wheel, This idea was not strange. In fact, almost every cultivator who had been to the Ferris wheel would have this idea. The problem was, thinking and doing were two different things. There were countless escape techniques in the cultivation world. Among them, the most advanced was teleportation. It was also something that high-level cultivators tirelessly pursued. Cultivators were particular about light clouds and light winds, lifting heavy things as if they were light. With a wave of their hand, they could come and go freely. Therefore, it was hard to imagine that cultivators would raise their butts and speed up while flying and speed up again and again. They were more interested in things that were related to mystery, and speed was a skill that only low-level cultivators should master. Disappearing from its original location, instantly teleporting to another place, it was extremely profound and also extremely elegant, full of immortal energy. However, it didn't have any acceleration process at all. It was the process of a cannon being teleported by a mysterious force. This was also the most mainstream thing in the cultivation world today. The swordsman was different, and Lu Xiaoyi was even more different. He preferred to travel at lightning speed and fly inch by inch from point A to point B. He didn't want to appear directly from point A to point B. This was a personal habit as well as a cultivation philosophy. There was no distinction between good and bad. Lu Xiaoyi's method was destined to not allow him to teleport. However, if these two combat flying methods were to be compared in a battle, it would be hard to tell which one was better. Lu Xiaoyi's method was clumsy, but teleportation also had many shortcomings. For example, there was stiffness. For example, there was also a distance limit. In comparison, flying from one celestial body to another, Lu Xiaoyi's clumsy running method was faster than the majority of cultivators. This was because he didn't feel stiff, and he always maintained complete control over his body. He was always in the attacking state of the flying sword. As long as he made the slightest mistake, the flying sword would arrive. His perseverance had always been a personal preference, but now, this perseverance had brought him great rewards. For other cultivators, they hadn't practiced this clumsy running method for hundreds or thousands of years. However, he was practicing it every day and running clumsily every day. Just from this point alone, in the entire universe, was there anyone who could achieve the same level of speed as him? Therefore, everyone knew that the Ferris wheel would constantly increase and decrease its speed as it rotated, but no one dared to say that they could achieve the same level of speed as the Ferris wheel. They could only do research and then search for other types of speed tools that could help them achieve the same changes in speed. They had never thought that a human body could also achieve this while running. Of course, there was also the celestial lifting movement technique as a foundation. Everything seemed to be tailor-made for him. However, Lu Xiaoyi knew that it was wrong to think this way. The reason why he had such hope was because he had never stopped working hard to become stronger. Even if there was no space for speed, there must be other methods. Heaven rewards the diligent. What Huijin didn't know was that she was lucky enough to witness the rise of a sword immortal in the future. She just felt that it was very unusual for a cultivator of such a realm to be able to fly like this. Not to mention a true monarch, even a nascent soul cultivator like her was constantly honing her teleportation ability most of the time. In this world, who would be stupid enough to fly? There were such fools. Although it was very difficult to follow, it was also very interesting. She wanted to tell this cultivator that this obsession with changing speed couldn't really help him break through the dimensional space. He still needed to change direction, but this was the core of the strange door. She had no right to reveal it. Besides, there was no relationship between them. She could use other ways to repay this small favor. Using the core of the mountain gate, this was not equivalent. However, this strange Taoist was indeed a gentleman. After the two of them traveled together, he only cared about his cultivation. Not to mention talking to her, he didn't even look at her. This made her somewhat self-deprecating. She was called the strange flower of the strange mountain in vain. In the eyes of a real cultivator, she was nothing. However, in the eyes of other cultivators in the dimensional space, the two of them were like a pair of tantrums. The male cultivator ran in front angrily while the female cultivator chased after him desperately. Until 10 days later, Two familiar figures appeared in front of her. Martial uncle and senior brother came, but Yuan was not there. Did some unforeseen event happen? Martial uncle and senior brother didn't seem to be the same. Martial uncle hugged the mountain, and his face was rosy. At a glance, she could tell that his mental state was very good. However, senior brother Yen Li was a bit strange. She was the most familiar with senior brother in the mountain gate. Martial uncle was very rare. At this moment, a sentence from the cultivator in front of her floated in her heart. Maybe, following me will increase the chances of seeing the people in your mountain gate. Why would he say such a thing? What did it mean? Moreover, how did Martial uncle and senior brother find her so quickly? There was no sense of direction in the dimensional space, and there was no star positioning. The cultivators of the strange mountain didn't have the so-called tradition of locating each other. Martial uncle hugged the rock and swept past her. He raised his voice and shouted to the front, "Thank you for taking care of the people of the strange door. Can we talk in private?" This old man also expressed his gratitude. Chapter 1569. P.S. The real person likes to watch it at noon. Lu Xiaoyi stopped in his tracks. Was there no end to this? It was because he was grateful for this person's guidance, even if it was unintentional, that he didn't want to spend too much time with this old man. He was afraid that he would kill this old man again. But he didn't expect that he couldn't avoid him no matter how hard he tried. What did he see in him? Was he in a hurry to reincarnate? Since she had called him, he couldn't run away anymore. His patience was limited. So he stopped and looked at the three people with a smile. The space is so big, but we can still meet. Our fate is not shallow. Bao Shi laughed. That's right. As the saying goes, if we are destined to meet, we won't know each other. Fellow Taoist, you are the first person to appreciate the void crown and return it to its original state. Without your example, the others wouldn't be so honest. Now, I am indebted to you for taking care of my disciples at the foot of the strange mountain. With such fate, I have to thank you properly no matter what. Lu Xiaoyi made a final effort. Meeting by chance is just a small matter. Senior, please don't mind it. Since everyone is here, I won't disturb you anymore. Bao Shi smiled. No hurry, no hurry. Fellow Taoist, you only want peace of mind. Have you ever thought that I also want peace of mind? When I showed you the treasure last time, I was actually selfish and hid the most important function of the treasure. At that time, there was nothing wrong with what he did. But now that he thought about it, he was too petty. Well, now I will show you all the functions of the void crown and let you see it thoroughly. He said it naturally, as if there was no problem. Like an old-fashioned old man who didn't want to take advantage of others, he raised his hand and threw the void crown over. Slowly and leisurely, Lu Xiaoyi smiled and narrowed his eyes. As sharp as he was, he had already realized that there was something wrong with this thing. But under such circumstances, he really couldn't refuse. It would be safest to turn around and leave, but it would be a joke. What if the old man was sincere? But if he caught it, he might put himself in danger for no reason. Even if he wanted to be a hero, he had to have a sense of propriety. He could only spread his magic power from afar, trying to push the treasure back. This was the most suitable method he could think of. When his magic power made contact with the levitation crown, an inexplicable and irresistible force came over, causing Lu Xiaoyi to be momentarily absent-minded. When he regained his senses, he was no longer in his original space. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't stop it. He was still too soft-hearted. Huaijin looked at the changes in front of her in shock. She couldn't understand why her martial uncle would do this. Martial uncle, did you bring him into the treasure space? Huashi laughed. Not bad. Your eyes are much sharper than Yen Li's. Huaijin was puzzled.
Why?
Aren't you still thanking him? Even if they were not friends, there was no need to make such a joke, right? This person has helped Huaijin with a small matter. We have traveled together for more than 10 days, and he has been very polite. He is a gentleman who can't be more proper. Please let him out, martial uncle. Huashi rolled his eyes. How could this girl talk to her elders like that? Was she blaming him for this? I'm thanking him. But that doesn't mean I won't blame him. Daring to look at my treasure means that he has the intention to peep. Am I wronging him? Observe etiquette? How many people in this world are beasts with human faces? You can see through a monarch's character in only 10 days. Who gave you the confidence? I have been plotting against this person for a long time. Now that the people who have seen my treasure are all inside, they deserve to be punished. I need to observe carefully. You two step aside and watch for me. The situation inside the void corona could be faintly sensed from the outside. Of course, it was not as clear as watching a movie. They could only vaguely analyze and judge the changes in the aura and guess who killed who in the end. In theory, no matter who came out alive in the end, they would not let him go. But he was not without a backup plan. If everything went smoothly, no one would come out alive. He was too clear about the hatred these people had for him. How could he not be prepared? Although he came from a technical background, he was no stranger to the phrase, cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The two nascent souls spread out far away to act as lookouts. Although they were very far away, they couldn't stop the two from communicating with each other using their divine sense. Soon, Huijin figured out the whole story. She began to worry. Senior brother, do you think Martial Uncle did the right thing? Yanli did not hesitate. No. This is not in line with the philosophy of Strange Mountain. If there is a chance later, I will report it to the sect. But now, junior sister, do you think we can persuade Martial Uncle? Or do we have a countermeasure? Huijin was silent. Yes, no matter what they did wrong, Huijin was still their senior. No matter in terms of status, seniority, or even strength, what else could they do but wait passively? There were many rules in Strange Mountain, but all the rules were based on the premise that internal disputes should be discussed behind closed doors. They could not be shown in front of others. Outside, they should be united against outsiders. In fact, this was the rule of almost all sections. Can the Lee Sky Crown trap these people? Even if they really kill each other inside. If they can break the Lee Sky Crown, it means the loss of the sect's Holy Spirit. Not to mention the consequences of breaking out. Huijin tried not to think of the worst-case scenario, but she could not control herself. Because Yanli had stayed with Huijin in the dimensional space for a long time, he had experienced the process of every cultivator being pulled into the space, so he thought more deeply. In my opinion, Martial Uncle has no intention of letting them out at all. Even if there is only one lucky person left. The Lee Sky Crown should still have some tricks up its sleeve. We don't know much about it, but it is frightening to be tied together with Holy Spirit Ayuan like this. Huijin pondered. Holy Spirit Ayuan also has its own trump card. It doesn't make sense that after fusing with the Lee Sky Crown, it would lose its own thing. Then is it? Yanli nodded. The rules of the Heavenly Tao are not complete. The Lee Sky Crown can easily pull people into the space, so it can't be very powerful. If Martial Uncle wants to trick people, he can only use Ayuan's ability. We all know Ayuan. When it uses its ability, it will not stop until it is dead. I think these people may not be able to withstand it. Huijin was silent for a long time. It should be like this. When two treasures fuse, they need to sacrifice lives and blood. Martial Uncle is using the two fierce beasts as an excuse to use the cultivators as a living sacrifice for the newly fused treasure. Only then can the new treasure's power be maximized. Senior brother, does Strange Mountain have such a method? Yanli sighed.
No.
Strange Mountain is an orthodox Taoist inheritance. How can there be such a fierce refining method? But Martial Uncle has been wandering outside all year round, so it is not strange that he learned some strange methods. Huijin pointed to the core. If so, is Martial Uncle still Martial Uncle? Chapter 1570. Not to mention the two bizarre mountain disciples who still had good intentions, Lu Xiaoyi immediately felt the stench of blood as soon as he entered this inexplicable space. Just like everyone else who came in, his first instinct was to try and find a way out. Unfortunately, it was the same as not being able to get out of the two-dimensional space created by the Ferris wheel. Here, the levitation crown borrowed the power of the celestial phenomenon. A really good treasure. Since he couldn't get out for the time being, Lu Xiaoyi didn't dawdle on this problem. It was obvious that the old man didn't have any good intentions in bringing him into this space. He had to deal with the difficulties in front of him first, then figure out how to get out. He was still a little careless, or perhaps he didn't know enough, or perhaps his heart wasn't hard enough. This was a lesson that he must remember. Could it be a treasure that could help him pass a trial? Or could it be a peerless demon? Or could it be a test of intelligence? If a certain object was called a crown, there were two possibilities. It could be the crown of a noble family in the mortal world, or it could be the outermost layer of a star's atmosphere. Since the levitation crown was a space treasure, of course, it wouldn't be in the shape of a human's hat. Its true form was like a basin with the bottom of it. He had sensed this treasure from the outside, so he wasn't unfamiliar with it. After entering, he made some judgments. At the very least, he had a general idea of its direction. This object pulled people into the space at the bottom of the basin, where the space barrier was the thickest. From the bottom of the basin to the edge of the basin, one couldn't walk in a straight line, but could only spiral upwards. He didn't know how many circles it would take to get to the edge of the basin, where the space barrier was the weakest. That should be the process, but he didn't know if there were any traps in it. His surroundings were empty. There were no traces of people and no other life forms. Until now, he still didn't know that he wasn't the only one who was pulled in. He was still troubled by why the old man didn't like him. He didn't do anything bad, did he? He didn't delay his experiment, nor did he harm the female disciples of the strange mountain. He used to be arrogant and easily offended people, but now he had become a low-key gentleman. He didn't even have any thoughts about beautiful women, so why did the old man still take the initiative to come to him? Was it written on his face that he was easy to bully? Since he was already here, he decided to take things as they came. He began to slowly fly out of the spiral space. Although it was called a spiral, it was actually extremely deep and wouldn't hinder a cultivator's battle. It might be a little cramped for a swordsman, but it was still within an acceptable range. Lu Xiaoyi was on guard because, according to legends, peace meant that danger would come suddenly, and he would be caught off guard. As he flew slowly, he carefully considered his current situation. Even though he had reached a high level in the Tao of space, his knowledge was still extremely limited compared to the vastness of the Tao of space. Even if a cultivator was proficient in the Tao of space, he wouldn't dare to say that he could deal with all space phenomena, including the endless imagination of human cultivators. What he was studying right now was the Tao of natural space, which was very important when fighting in the wild. However, what old man sure gave him was the Tao of artifact space. He didn't have the energy to do both at the same time. In theory, the natural space sequence was higher than the artifact space. Therefore, when he encountered the pull of the void corona, the best solution was to establish a natural dimensional space first, which would allow him to easily avoid the constraints of the artifact space. But that was only in theory. In fact, very few people could react so fast, and no one had the ability to establish a natural dimensional space in an instant. In the future, he might be able to do it. It wasn't the space gate, which was too troublesome and would consume his mana and soul. His future depended on the speed of this dimensional space. If he succeeded in the future, he would be able to break into the two-dimensional space to avoid the danger. But right now, he was still figuring it out. This was the price he had to pay to achieve his goal. Along the way, he kept testing the thickness of the space barrier. There was good news and bad news. The good news was that the barrier was getting weaker and weaker as it spiraled up. The bad news was that the barrier seemed to be weakening a bit too slowly, and there was no hope of breaking it. What puzzled Lu Xiaoyi was that there were no traps or dangers. Could it be that old man sure wanted to keep him here forever? Was that even possible? The energy of the void corona came from the Ferris wheel, and the energy of the Ferris wheel came from a faraway celestial phenomenon. When the two-dimensional space barrier created by the Ferris wheel collapsed, this place would also collapse. He had been here for 12 days. In other words, in 20 days, he didn't need to do anything, and this space would collapse naturally. Was that even possible? If it was so simple, why did Big Rock drag him here? Was it just to find himself an opponent? There must be something he didn't think of. Lu Xiaoyi sped up. He had to fly through the entire space before deciding on his own way to break it. According to his usual style of doing things, he wouldn't passively wait for the space to collapse by itself. He would rather use his own strength and pay the price to break it. This was a principle that a proud swordsman must have. It was not only to train himself, but also to not be controlled by others. Only one day later, there was a collision of spiritual vigor in front of him. Lu Xiaoyi couldn't be more familiar with this. He sighed. The thing he didn't want to happen the most had happened. The danger in the void corona didn't come from the void corona itself, but from the humans. Although he could only sense it from afar, he could guess who was fighting there with his eyes closed. Needless to say, they were all people who had seen the void corona before. In the end, it was he, Lu Xiaoyi, who had started it. Calling him an accomplice was not wrong. He Qian was very gloomy. The battle was gloomy, the environment was gloomy, and his mood was gloomy. He and his master, Three Cups, had started a life and death battle with the two thieves as soon as they entered. The two parties who looked down on each other fought from the bottom of the spiral all the way to the periphery of the spiral, but no one could do anything to the other. The two thieves had a rich experience and were indifferent to life and death. Their strength was indeed higher than the cultivators of the dozens of universes nearby, so it was very difficult to deal with them. Similarly, the two outsiders who came from famous big worlds didn't lose out either. They had profound cultivation and many tricks up their sleeves. In the battle, they showed the demeanor of the big sects of the upper realm. As for cooperation, one side was a senior brother, and the other was a master and disciple. There was nothing to say. Although the two brothers didn't see each other often, as the two most famous thieves in this space, they couldn't rely on each other. When they fought, they were even closer than real brothers. Needless to say, the master and disciple were as close as father and son. In this battle, the two sides were evenly matched. It was a situation where no one could do anything to the other. It was a battle between a hero from the countryside and a disciple from a famous sect, and no one was satisfied with the result. Chapter 1571. Baosher's plan was very successful. This was the characteristic of a cultivator who specialized in technology. He was meticulous and considerate. But when it came to the battle arrangement, he immediately lost his ground. He first pulled in the black and white villains. This was not wrong, and he also threw in the incarnation of the Holy Spirit Ayuan. But then he found the Three Cups and his disciple. In his opinion, these two were the only ones who could fight against the black and white villains, so he chose them first. But as soon as he pulled them in, the battle immediately became a stalemate. There was no clear winner. He didn't know that cultivators also needed to be stimulated by blood. If there was no blood and no death, it meant that there was still room for negotiation. Although the battle was fierce, it actually met the basic conditions for reconciliation, because no one died. The four of them fought all the way from the bottom of the spiral to the edge of the spiral. During the battle, they also tested the strength of the space barrier, but the result was disappointing. Then, more and more people began to come. The 6 cultivators on the other satellite were also pulled in one by one. Even the 2 little Yuanying were not spared. When there were too many people, the only result was that they didn't dare to fight to their heart's content, because the people in the void separation crown were divided into 3 groups. The 3 Cups and his disciple and the White Light brothers were much stronger individually, but they had fewer people. The other 6 cultivators had more people, but their strength was not enough. So they provoked each other in the stalemate. They didn't dare to use their full strength, for fear that a third party would suddenly intervene. 3 legs could stand firm. This was what Baosher, the schemer, didn't expect. He had no problem in terms of professionalism and scheming, but there was a problem in his judgment of the actual battle. He should have pulled in the 6 people first. The black and white villains were ruthless. They would definitely kill someone, and then things would get out of hand. But now no one died, and the battle was in a stalemate. This was completely different from his original intention. He was thinking about how to introduce variables. This arrogant guy was his only hope now. The plan began to deviate. Bowser was very clear that these people were basically all the people in the Void Separation Crown. It was not that they couldn't pull in the treasure, but it was very difficult for outsiders to join. They had never seen the Void Separation Crown. If they just handed it to someone who would dare to take it, the only one who could pull in strangers, the Holy Spirit Yuan, had already completed its mission. Now it needed to take charge of the Void Separation Crown. Hopefully, this hot-tempered guy would be able to break the balance between the three parties. If he couldn't do it, when he used Yuan to forcefully erase it, there might be an accident because there were too many heads inside. At this time, two juniors came to his side. Whoosher glared at them. I asked you to keep a lookout. What are you doing here? What's wrong? You can't even listen to your elders? Huai Jin spoke. The two of them had already decided that they could not fall out with their martial uncle, nor could they ignore the worsening of the situation. The only way was to join in and see what they could do to minimize the impact of this incident on the sect. They were all the most outstanding people of the strange mountain Yuanying, so they naturally had their own responsibilities. Martial uncle, one person's plan is short, but several people's plan is long. Since you've pulled us to participate in this plan, of course we have the obligation to participate. You don't need a lookout. You know very well that this is just an excuse for you to send us away. Whoosher realized that his plan was deviating further and further. Not only was he unable to control the enemy, but he was also unable to control his juniors. He didn't know that this was the problem that technical talents had to go through when they wanted to harm others. They could have a strategy on paper, or they could have a perfect start. However, if they continued to go on, they would enter the stage where they needed rich experience in battle and sophisticated human psychology. That would be the moment his plan began to collapse. Are you rebelling? Huai Jin was still pleasant. Martial uncle, you'll always be the perfect martial uncle. We never thought that one day we would go against you. But now there are no outsiders around, so we have the right to express our thoughts. No matter what your purpose is, whether it's really for the sect or for other reasons, there's one thing you're not doing. What you're doing is not authorized by the sect. The Holy Spirit Yuan was also secretly brought out by you. We're not doubting you, but we want to be like you. We want to control the progress of the situation and express our opinions at the critical moment. You can't refuse. Whoosher looked at the two juniors. They looked at him without fear, and he could feel their determination. He brought them here because they were not monarchs and couldn't stop him. However, they were strong in Yuanying and had the ability to protect themselves. But now it seemed that he was wrong. Since they were the best in Yuanying, they must have their reasons for being so. They wouldn't follow the crowd, wouldn't fear power, and dare to take responsibility. Now, he was the one who was being taken responsibility. For his plan, these two juniors were very annoying. But for the Strange Mountain sect, it was a blessing to have such juniors. He didn't want to overturn the sect. He just wasn't satisfied with the irresponsibility of some of the higher-ups in the sect. So he fell into the old habit of being a pedant and didn't care about anything. All right, let's watch it together. I'll also tell you my plan without holding anything back. But what I want to say is that since things have developed to this point and our relationship has deteriorated, you can't just judge by your heart. You should judge by the future development of the sect. Huai Jin heaved a sigh of relief. Martial uncle, if you can easily eliminate all the people inside, we won't stop you. Even if we don't agree with your way of doing things at this point, destroying humanity is actually the best way to avoid future troubles. As a cultivator, we can't be soft-hearted. We understand this principle, but if you can't completely eliminate them, then we have to make the most practical judgment in the process. We can't let you go down a dark path. At that time, we may give our own opinions. Everything should be done for the future of the sect. Please understand. Under the pressure, the pedant once again exposed his shortcomings in specific actions. He didn't have the ability to make decisions. Giving in at this time basically meant that he would fail. A real hero wouldn't do this. He needed to have a firm will, a clear goal, and the courage to eliminate anyone who stood in his way, regardless of whether it was an outsider or his own people. So, in front of the spinning levitation crown, there was no longer one person observing, but three. While watching, Bowser explained how perfect his plan was. He guaranteed that there would be no future trouble. As long as there were no more than 5 cultivators left after killing each other, a Yuan would have a high chance of success. If there were no more than 3 people left, then success was almost guaranteed. But Huaijin's words made him speechless. "Martial uncle, so far, no one has died." Chapter 1572. Inside the void separation crown, the 3 sides were locked in a fierce battle, but each of them had their own thoughts and were unwilling to use their full strength. Among the 3 sides, the vicious duo hated the anchor chain master and disciple. This was due to their previous humiliation and the innate hostility of the common folk towards those with noble bloodlines. The 6 native cultivators hated the vicious duo. This was due to history and the natural result of committing too many sins. The anchor chain master and disciple, however, thought highly of themselves and disdained to join forces with anyone. They had their own considerations because not everyone had arrived, and it seemed like they were still missing one. They wanted to wait for everyone to arrive before deciding who to join forces with. This kind of battle could be imagined. It was fierce but not cruel. In a situation where both sides were at the same level, if they did not take risks and did not exchange injuries for lives, it was basically impossible to achieve any substantial breakthrough. In the distance, a fluctuation of spiritual vigor was rapidly approaching. Everyone was not surprised. That guy was the first to run, so it was reasonable for him to be caught by Old Man Huisher. Speaking of which, the biggest reason why everyone was in such a state was because of this guy. If he had not eaten his fill, and insisted on seeing the treasures on the spot, and made everyone leave their auras on the void separation crown, would they have been so easily captured and brought into the treasure crown space? Their hearts were indignant, and their eyes were unkind. They wanted to wait for this guy to arrive and properly put him in his place. Perhaps he would be the first to be sacrificed to the crown. Who told him to have the help of evil and to be alone? Of course, they had to pick the soft persimmon to pinch. This was the natural choice of the 3 sides after a long stalemate. The fluctuation of spiritual vigor in the distance was becoming more and more intense. It was extremely fast and majestic, like a rolling river.
No.
It was a sword river. Millions of sword lights almost filled up the space, leaving no room for anyone to dodge. This guy actually did not even show his face and did not even greet them before brazenly attacking 10 people. In the majestic sword lights, no one knew who this person was really going to attack. The result of the 10 people squeezing together was to push the danger away from each other. They always thought that the flying sword was not coming for them, but for someone else. They would never have thought that this arrogant guy was a swordsman. However, this was normal. Only swordsmen would be as unscrupulous as always. Moreover, with the might and sharpness of the sword river, there was probably no one present who had the ability to go against it alone. Only the White Light brothers and 3 Cups master and disciple were seriously resisting the flying swords, not because they might be the final targets, but because of their pride as cultivators. The sword light came and went without a trace. The defensive methods of the 10 cultivators were mixed together, affecting each other and undermining each other. White Light felt a chill on his head and knew that he was being targeted by the swordsman. His heart turned cold as he gathered his strongest forbidden spell and charged forward with his Tao artifact. Kacha! The forbidden spell was penetrated and his Tao artifact was split in half. The sudden danger forced him to retreat. Lu Xiaoyi gathered his sword and slashed at the White Light. However, he appeared in front of the 3 cups in the sword river. When he held a sword, his monstrous killing intent gripped the 3 rivers tightly. It was the sharpest killing intent that the old primordial spirit had ever felt since he started cultivating. It was as if it was going to penetrate the depths of his soul. He knew that he could not take it head-on. Engaging in close combat with the sword lunatic would cost him his life. Although his heart was still there, his body was honest. With a teleport, he was already far away. It was better to hide first. Black Corpse Zhang's attack came soon after. He thought that he could take advantage of the three-cup struggle to take advantage of the situation. However, he did not expect the old guy to be so cunning. Lu Xiaoyi attacked and instantly turned into nothingness. He kept changing between the real and the virtual of the Great Void Dao and successfully avoided Zhang's direct attack. The two of them collided in an instant. The long sword and Zhang's big banner clashed. Before Zhang could react, a big foot had already kicked him hard. His whole body was covered with sword force. Lu Xiaoyi did not pursue. His body shook slightly, and the sword river rolled again. There was only one person left at the scene. He Qian stood there and let out a long sigh. Fellow Daoist, you have shown your power. Just say what you want. He was quite a smart person. Lu Xiaoyi stood in the air and retracted the sword river. He asked, "Are you convinced?" He Qian did not hesitate. "I'm convinced." He then turned his gaze to the others. Three Cups smiled. Old people don't rely on their muscles and bones. Fighting to the death is a matter for you young people. This old man has no intention of doing so. They were indeed master and disciple. In fact, it was because they had seen through something. Bai Guang hugged Zhang and quickly probed. He found that the sword force was fierce, but it disappeared quickly. He knew that the swordsman did not kill him. He felt gloomy. This guy was too abnormal. He could not fight against him. We brothers are convinced. We will listen to fellow Daoists' arrangements. However, before this, we would like to know fellow Daoist's name. The four most troublesome cultivators had given in. The 6 cultivators were even more straightforward. They didn't even have the courage to face the sword river head-on. A million flying swords blotted out the sky and covered the earth. This was far beyond what they could comprehend. We are willing to listen to fellow Daoists' orders. Lu Xiaoyi snorted. 5 rings, Xianyuan Lu Xiaoyi. If anyone is dissatisfied and wants to settle the score, whether it is me or my sect, we welcome you at any time. 3 Cups and his disciple looked at each other and smiled bitterly. It was indeed this big worm. Bai Guangzhang's fighting spirit disappeared. This was a person who stirred up the universe's cultivation world. He had his own army and the universe's most powerful bandit behind him. This was a place that independent bandits like them regarded as a holy land. After so many years, the great battle that happened back then had spread throughout the universe. It was a person who achieved glory. At first, it sounded unbelievable. They only felt that it was exaggerated. Now that they had encountered it, they knew that the fame was not just for show. In fact, the Sword River attack from beginning to end had a purpose. It did not have killing as its sole purpose. That was why it was so easy to handle the attacks. It was as if one person could take on 10 people. But in fact, he could not even defeat these 4. 3 primordial spirits and 1 Yin spirit were the elites of their respective orthodoxies. How could they be so easy to deal with? But one thing was certain. 1 against 2, it would be very easy for him. In other words, if this was a 4-way battle, he would be the strongest. Strength, background, fame. All these added together, and when asked if they were convinced, success would follow naturally. In fact, this was the common goal of all 3 parties. Cultivators were not afraid of fighting, but there had to be a purpose. If they only killed for the sake of killing, and after killing, they would still be trapped in this treasure crown space. What was the point of fighting? They were all frequent visitors of the universe for at least 1,000 years. None of them did not understand this principle. All they needed was a way out, a person that everyone could be convinced of. When such a person appeared, they naturally could not fight. Just like the 2 from the anchor chain world. Were they really convinced? Not necessarily. Although a 5-ringed soul armature was strong, his anchor chain was not weak either. There was no question of who was stronger or weaker. However, 3 Cups was wise enough to retreat. In fact, his thousands of years of cultivation experience told him that the core problem he had to solve now was not a group fight. It was a problem of how to get out. Chapter 1573. Lu Xiaoyi was very direct. If we fight to the death here, I'm afraid that people will laugh at us from the outside. Who wants to be a monkey show? Well, I don't want to. Everyone was embarrassed. They all understood this logic, but knowing and doing were two different things. The swordsman had the confidence to say this. If anyone else said it, they would not have the same effect. Lu Xiaoyi went straight to the point. Luckily, no one died. Actually, you guys are all faking it. I only have one suggestion. If anyone fights in the space, everyone will attack together. Do you have any objections? Everyone shook their heads. First, they had to ensure the safety of the space. That was the prerequisite for leaving. No objections? Then come closer. Don't hide so far away. If we had taken precautions, we wouldn't have been dragged in here. The swordsman spoke very crudely, but he had his own charm. Thus, he instantly became the most trusted person in the group. This was because of his reputation and also because of the swordsman's style in the universe. When everyone came closer, he pointed at the vicious duo. I say, the two of you didn't see Zhongli's sky crown, right? How did you get dragged in? White light was being pointed at by a Aim master who was one level lower than him. He did not feel that there was anything wrong. After all, he was from a bandit's den. He was much stronger than them. It was the Holy Spirit of Strange Mountain who dragged us in. When White Light finished his explanation, the 6 cultivators knew the truth about Strange Mountain. However, Lu Xiaoyi and the Anchor Chain Man did not. They felt that it was very interesting to hear. Lu Xiaoyi looked at 3 cups and his disciple. How do we get out of the space? Your anchor chain domain is very famous in the universe and has a deep foundation. Do you have any good ideas? 3 cups was still polite. With a 5th ring expert here, we will make a fool of ourselves. Lu Xiaoyi interrupted him. I don't know if there are any 5th ring experts in this field, but there definitely aren't any in Xianyuan. I don't understand these twists and turns. I only know how to wave my sword around. Let's be frank. Everyone take out their own treasures. There must be a way that works. With such words, it saved a lot of hypocrisy and hypocrisy. Everyone had their own tricks. In an instant, there were a lot of ideas, and they were all very reasonable. After all, the realm was here, and there were no useless people who ate for nothing. Lu Xiaoyi continued to instruct, draw up a plan. Start with the most promising method. He was speechless after 3 glasses. Shouldn't this be something that the leader should do? Why don't we let fellow Daoists decide? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. I don't know anything.
I don't know anything.
I can only make decisions for everyone. I'll cheer for you. At this moment, everyone understood Swordsman's way of doing things. The Sword Soldier Army was also like this. They were used to being the boss who left everything to others. Although they despised him, this kind of leader was not annoying. Thus, with 3 cups, who was the most experienced, taking the lead, everyone gradually perfected the plan. This was also a field of competition. How could you have the nerve to come up with an idea that wasn't high-end enough and wasn't surprising enough? Wasn't this embarrassing himself? There were many ways to lead. Lu Xiaoyi chose the one that was the most worry-free. The advantage of this was that it gave everyone the most space to perform and could satisfy the cultivator's desire to excel. Ever since he founded the Sword Soldier Army, he no longer had the leisure to be a nanny for others. Suddenly, he thought of a problem. Old Shir's purpose can't be to gather us here to shake hands and make peace. Other than making us kill each other, he must have his own trump card. What is it? What do you think? The Strange Mountain Holy Spirit. This was the opinion of almost all the local cultivators. Outside the levitation corona, the 3 cultivators of the Strange Mountain were silently observing. Although they couldn't see, they could infer from the changes in the levitation corona. They could roughly guess. It seems that they have reconciled. Huai Jin concluded. Even without her reminder, Bao Shi could feel that his plan was officially declared dead. Where did the problem lie? Yan Li's words were harsh. Martial uncle, the cultivation world is not a novel. The possibility of inciting a group of cultivators to kill each other is very small. Unless you can offer enough practical benefits, otherwise, without the motivation of benefits, who would risk their lives for the so-called dispute of personal feelings. Let's stop. Under such circumstances, the possibility of them breaking through space is very high. As long as one of them comes out, the reputation of the strange mountain will be ruined. Huijin also said, "Martial uncle, we can't let the Holy Spirit take action. With the Holy Spirit, Yuan's way of attacking, once it takes action, the consequences will be uncontrollable. If the Holy Spirit is lost, we won't be able to explain to the sect when we go back, and we will be sinners of the strange mountain. You are an elder of the strange mountain, so you know the importance of this matter. If we stop now, these people may hold a grudge against us. However, among them, there are travelers from the universe who can't stay here forever. There are also small sects that are not strong enough to pose a threat to the strange mountain. The only trouble is the black and white villains. However, they have always been against all the sects and forces in this area, and they have always been targeting the strange mountain, so it's no different from before. As long as we spread the word that this time we are here to kill the black and white villains, we will have to give up in the end. If that's really the case, there won't be too big of a consequence." The two tried their best to persuade Baosher. In fact, this elder with the highest attainment in space of the strange mountain was immersed in the study of the Tao state all year round, and he was not very clear about the disputes of the world. However, Baosher was a member of the strange mountain, and he didn't want to really hurt the sect. After thinking about it, there was really no other way. After carefully inspecting the void corona, they found that there was no sign of battle at all. There was none now, which meant that there would not be any in the future. Baosher's face darkened. He didn't know if it was the right choice to bring these two juniors here. This would have to be decided by time. He was also very clear in his heart that when the 11 cultivators reached a consensus and passed through the difficulties together, it was very unrealistic for the Holy Spirit to kill them all. Yuan was only the Holy Spirit of the strange mountain, not the Holy Spirit of the entire universe. There was also no strange power in the cultivation world that could turn 11 cultivators into nothingness in an instant. There was always a corresponding price to pay. Baosher's heart was filled with depression. He was a true immortal cultivator, but he was looked down upon by two juniors who were Yuanying. This was the harm of being too obsessed with one's profession. In the end, he made a fool of himself in a field that he was unfamiliar with. He was good at research, but not killing people. Killing people not only required a series of plans, but also many other things, such as a grasp of the human heart. For the sake of his face, he didn't say anything. He just silently ordered the Holy Spirit in the void corona. "Don't attack. Wait for my command to release the space of the void corona." To his surprise, the Holy Spirit didn't say a word and continued to prepare. After several failed attempts to contact the Holy Spirit, he finally forgot about his reputation and murmured, "That's right, the Holy Spirit didn't say a word. The Holy Spirit is out of control." Chapter 1574. Huijin was speechless. Uncle Master had been doing research for so long that he treated them like children. "Uncle Master, you don't have to lie to us. No matter what the situation is, we can't force you. We can't afford to do that. Please don't play dumb, okay? If you want to withdraw, then withdraw. If you insist, then persist. At least let us know your attitude." Baisher was also very depressed. It really lost control. I called it many times. It ignored me and kept preparing to attack. Although I don't care about worldly affairs these years, I'm not so old that I can't tell right from wrong, right? Come, let's work together and use the Mountain Gates method of controlling spirits to forcefully awaken it. The two Yuanying didn't dare to delay. If Uncle Master said so, then he must be serious. The strange sect had its own method of controlling spirits. It was one of the Mountain Gates orthodoxies. It was ready-made and didn't need to be learned. With the three of them working together, Baisher either ordered, pleaded, threatened, or used soft words. But who knew that the Holy Spirit seemed to have eaten a weight and ignored them all? It was as if it didn't recognize its master. Yen Li was a little confused. "Uncle Master, did something happen during the fusion process? Did the Holy Spirit's temperament change? Why Jean thought more. Uncle Master, other than the Void Crown and the Holy Spirit, did you add anything else during the fusion process? Baishar was a little embarrassed because he had already realized this problem. He didn't expect this girl to be so sharp and hit the nail on the head. Because the Holy Spirit has always been a lonely spirit, it didn't want to fuse with the Void Crown and didn't want to have its own solidified body. So I added other spirits. I promise, they are all the purest spirits that I have purified for hundreds of years. I originally wanted to use them for other purposes, but then I had an idea why Jean didn't give up. Uncle Master, what kind of spirit is it? Is it a demons? Void beasts? Or humans? Baishar said awkwardly. Humans. Why Jean and Yenli looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Humans? This was the most cunning race in the cultivation world? In the cultivation world, the purification of the human soul was the most difficult because the human race was best at disguise. 100 years was a very long time for the souls of demonic beasts. It was so long that they couldn't maintain their disguise for such a long period of time. However, if it was a human, even a few hundred years wouldn't be of any use. Therefore, Stone's so-called purification was only from a technical point of view, but from a psychological point of view, one would never be able to understand a human soul. Until now, they still couldn't be sure if the problem was with the human soul. They could only say that it was most likely the cause. Only Baishar knew this. However, they couldn't find out the specific evolution process. It was already out of control, and there was no way to find out. The three from the strange mountain had encountered the biggest crisis of this trip. Not to mention that they had offended so many forces. Just the loss of the strange mountain itself was almost a foregone conclusion. This kind of soul fusion operation was simply irreversible. You didn't even know to what extent they had fused together. Can a Yuan come back? Or a Holy Spirit a Yuan that had already been taken over by a human spirit? There was nothing he could do. He was destined to lose. It was a complete and utter failure. How could he explain this to the higher-ups of the mountain when he returned? Why Jean was still calm. Marshal Uncle, are you sure the Holy Spirit? Oh no, this out-of-control treasure spirit wants to attack. Baishar nervously observed the inside of the floating corona. The floating corona, the Holy Spirit a Yuan, and that unknown human spirit had become a monster in his hands. However, he was the one who created it after all. He could understand the monster's thoughts better than anyone else. It wants to take over a body. It wants to take over a body. This is the wish of a human soul. It definitely isn't a Yuan's. A Yuan hates having a body the most. Oh no, we can't even accurately determine which cultivator it wants to take over. Can you inform the cultivators inside to be careful? Instead of letting this monster with human thoughts and Holy Spirit abilities appear, I'd rather be condemned by everyone in the strange mountain. Why Jean no longer cared about her elegance and shouted loudly. Baishar nervously tried. Then, the three of them suddenly trembled and disappeared from the dimensional space. Now, the Holy Spirit was going all out. It actually sucked the three of them into the treasure corona's space. Outside, there was only the floating corona left. It wandered aimlessly in the dimensional space. Whoever picked it up would be unlucky. In the space, the floating corona's space order began to collapse. This was the self-destruction of the treasure corona's spirit. To that lonely human spirit, what treasure's body could be better than a living human's body? This was probably the common wish of all human spirits. The goal was simple. By destroying the floating corona's space order, it would create temporary chaos. In the process, sucking in the three from the strange mountain would only worsen the chaos. This wouldn't take too long, but it was enough for the human spirit to find a satisfactory body. The three from the strange mountain knew what it was thinking. However, the other 11 people in the floating corona were completely clueless. This was the beginning of chaos. It was something that couldn't be explained with words. The people in the space who were fooled would definitely take revenge on the three of them. There would be a massacre, Plus the collapse of the space order, it had to be said that this human's plan was much more cunning than Baishur's. It was completely feasible and very sinister. If everything went well, it even had the possibility of a perfect replacement. No one would know. Lu Xiaoyi and the other 11 people had just decided on a plan to break through the space barrier. What happened next completely destroyed their plans. The space collapsed. The spiraling tunnel disappeared completely. The entire Treasure Corona's space was in a state of chaos. Anyone with a little bit of Dao realm knowledge would know that this was the prelude to the collapse of the space. Who did this? Did he run into an enemy outside while carrying Old Shur? Even someone as imaginative as Lu Xiaoyi didn't think that the floating Corona's spirit would self-destruct. Because of the destruction of the space order and the birth of chaos, the violent pulling force made the 11 people unable to gather together. He only had time to shout out one sentence. Don't be fooled by the illusion in front of you. Remember what you promised me. No matter what happens, the biggest possibility is that the sacred spirit's attack has begun. Everyone understood what the swordsman meant. It was to remind them not to attack each other. They had to keep their promise. This was their principle. If everyone kept their promise, then if someone was attacked, it would mean that it was the sacred spirit that attacked them. This was the only thing he could remind everyone as their leader. As for whether or not everyone could keep their promise, that was another matter. Chapter 1575. Because the space was in chaos, the divine sense was greatly restricted. Everyone's perception of the surrounding space had dropped to a dangerous level. In such an environment, even the slightest movement could trigger a fight. What was not to take the initiative to attack others? There was no clear concept. What kind of contact was considered an attack? There was no strict division. Cultivators had many different methods, but it was not just swinging a knife to attack. Did the locking of divine sense count? Did passively erecting a defensive barrier count? There were too many in the chaos. A spirit floated in the chaotic space. Its empty eyes could feel an endless desire, a desire for a fresh body that had lasted for thousands of years. That stupid old man was caught in his own trap. He thought he was smart, but in the end, he gave it such a rare opportunity. If it did not know how to use it, it was not worthy of being a human soul. The spirit of the Void Crown? He did not care. The spirit of the Strange Mountain? He did not care. As a former human, he only wanted to be himself. Was that too much to ask for? Everything that happened was not his idea. The cause and effect had nothing to do with him. He was just using it at the end. As for bleeding and dying, in the human world of cultivation, was that a thing? It happened every day. At least he had a purpose. Many deaths in battle were without a purpose. The time before was wasted on controlling the self-destruction of the Void Crown. To be honest, the time he had control of the Void Crown was too short. Although this treasure had not fully formed its own intelligence, it already had its own instinctive rules. If it wanted to self-destruct the crown, it would take a lot of effort. This was the reason why he did not have time to pay attention to those human cultivators, even though he controlled the Void Crown to a certain extent. He had to completely destroy this crown in order to truly create chaos. Because in his current soul state, he had no way of launching an effective attack against a human cultivator. Not to mention a true monarch, he might not even be able to handle yuanying. The strength of the spirit was very strong, but it was not entirely his strength. Also, because the time was too short, he was unable to completely control the spirit's strength. He did not dare to use it, afraid that the spirit's consciousness that he had suppressed with great difficulty would awaken again. The ideal situation was to first obtain a satisfactory human body, then use it as a foundation to slowly digest the spirit's strength. This was the right way. Therefore, his priority now was to choose a body. After weighing all the 14 humans in the space, he came up with his own ranking. Of course, a monarch's body was the best. This would save him from the most difficult problem of breaking through to the upper realm after he became a human. Among the 14 people, there were 10 true monarchs, and all of them had excellent physiques. Of course, how could they become true monarchs? Among them, there were 5 people who were particularly outstanding. They were the anchor master and disciple, the vicious duo, and the swordsman. If one were to consider age, 2 masters would be the most suitable choice. They were all over 1,000 years old, youthful and young. In terms of realms, the 3 primordial spirits were the most worthy, especially the ferocious duo. As for old Daoist Sango, he was a little too old. Did he take over his body just to dig a coffin for him? However, these were things that he would have to consider later. His priority right now was to take over Yuanying's body as a transition. Only then would he consider becoming a supreme. These things had to be done now. They had to be done in the primal chaos space. Once they were out, how could it be so easy to seize possession? Not to mention the danger, the success rate was not high either. Among the 4 Yuanying, there was only 1 female cultivator. She was not someone he considered. For human males, if they had the chance to change bodies, they would most likely still choose to be male. They would not choose to be a yin cultivator just because they were lustful. Would it be convenient for them to touch themselves? The remaining 3 people could be any one of them. After all, they were all transients. His final goal was to become a supreme. He stared at the 3 Yuanying, waiting for an opportunity. He had his eyes on Yanli, because his first instinct was to kill one of the cultivators from the Bazaar Mountain. At the very least, it would delay the time for the secret to be exposed. When Yanli passed by the front of the river, he only needed to take the opportunity to attack the front of the river. There was a high chance that a battle would break out. How could a mere Yuanying withstand a supreme's attack?
He did not need to die.
He only needed to be injured for him to take advantage of the situation. However, he did not make his move in the end. The disadvantages of taking over Yan Li's body were obvious. If the cultivators from the original space saw him, he would not be able to escape death. Moreover, as a cultivator from the Bazaar Mountain, he did not have the chance to take over the bodies of the few true monarchs. He could only make his move from the 2 Yuanying in the original space. It was the safest. Opportunities were reserved for those with patience. He had waited for hundreds of years. He did not lack patience. The space within the treasure crown wasn't very big, and the 14 people inside didn't dare to move quickly in such a chaotic and violent situation. They were afraid that they would cause misunderstandings among the people around them. But even so, there was still a short distance between them. Just as one of the nascent soul stage cultivators approached Black Corpse Zhangjiang, he sandwiched between the 2 of them and launched a fierce soul shockwave at the other party. This nascent soul stage cultivator remembered the sword cultivator's instructions. His own people would never attack him without warning. If someone did, then it must be that holy spirit from the strange mountain who was playing tricks. Therefore, he did not hesitate to counterattack. In order to save his own life, he was afraid that his attack would not be sharp enough and powerful enough. The worst thing was that he was a Dharma cultivator. Therefore, his so-called strongest counterattack was a forbidden technique. A forbidden technique with a wide range. This time, Black Corpse Zhangjiang was caught in it. Black Corpse Zhangjiang had a fiery temper. How could he tolerate someone provoking him? His first reaction was to counterattack. However, he was much more experienced than the Yuanying. He sensed that this level of attack was a little far from the level of a holy spirit. Therefore, he did not strike back to kill. He was more concerned about probing. Even if he was probing, it was at the primordial spirit level. It was 2 levels away from the Yuanying. Not to mention, there was a gap in Dao unity. The Yuanying immediately suffered a great loss. He knew that things were not good and quickly retreated. At that moment, a soul crashed into him and instantly crashed into a sea of consciousness. Taking advantage of his injury and distraction, the soul successfully launched a sneak attack on him. Yuanying's soul had been weakened by the evolution process of the old Daoist Shi for hundreds of years. However, his spiritual energy was now protected by the Holy Spirit. Therefore, it was easy for him to swallow Yuanying's consciousness. Only at this moment did his plan really have a good start. With a body that could store spiritual energy, He could use the power of the Holy Spirit without worrying about the Holy Spirit Yuan's instinctive counterattack. This was the most crucial moment. Not only did he have to quickly digest the power of the Holy Spirit Yuan, but he also had to avoid the possible pursuit of the Black Corpse. As long as he could survive this, there would be endless possibilities for him in the future. He did not manage to avoid the Black Corpse's pursuit, but the Black Corpse did not kill him either. In an instant, the Black Corpse approached him. However, the Black Corpse did not swing his hood. Instead, he frowned. "Why is it you? Why did you attack for no reason? Fortunately, I went easy on you. Otherwise, you would have died." Chapter 1576. Actually, at this moment, the soul that had successfully taken over the body had yet to fully absorb the memories of the unlucky Yuanying. It would take a long time to fully absorb the memories. But the problem was that the Black Corpse did not know him. This was the first time they were on the same side. How would he know anything about him? He only knew that the Yuanying was indeed one of the 11. "I was ambushed by a mental attack. It was definitely targeting me. I was wondering if it was because of those words. But when I retaliated, I ended up implicating Senior. This was not what I wanted. Maybe I was a little nervous?" Everything he said was the truth, so it was flawless. However, he did not mention the most important part. The Black Corpse nodded. It was obvious that the Holy Spirit was hiding in the dark, trying to provoke them to kill each other. This was the space controlled by the Holy Spirit, so it wasn't strange for it to have the ability to conceal itself. Fortunately, he knew when to stop. Otherwise, this little nascent soul would have been killed by him before the Holy Spirit could kill it. The only thing he was curious about was that the treasure of the strange mountain was very powerful. How could it not deal with a small Yuanying? Or was it in his own space? Was it just a Sao discord? It seemed a little unnecessary. Just follow me and don't get separated. Otherwise, with your reckless personality, you will die if you meet the swordsman. You won't even have a chance to cry out." The Black Corpse ridiculed the swordsman. He was also dissatisfied with that kick. He did not return it. He only wanted to vent his anger. The situation in the space was very complicated. The worst thing was that the space was collapsing, so their senses were greatly weakened. It would be very difficult to gather everyone together. It would take time. He slowly flew in front, hoping to meet other companions. It would be best if it was his senior. The Yuanying followed closely behind, seizing the time to absorb the Yuanying's memories and digest the Holy Spirit's abilities. He was getting stronger with every breath, as long as he had enough time. Lu Xiaoyi and the Black Corpse had the same idea. They wanted to gather everyone together. It was not that they wanted to protect everyone, but they did not want to accidentally kill each other. He didn't know how to control his strength. If there were any abnormalities, he would never stop. This was a habit. It was precisely because he had a strong confidence in his own strength that his movement speed was the fastest among all of them. However, this kind of blind man groping like an elephant was also very difficult to help him bump into other people. His divine sense was too severely limited, so he was also very helpless. No matter how difficult it was, even a blind cat could encounter a mouse. Vaguely sensing a breath from the side, Lu Xiaoyi unhesitatingly drew his sword. He didn't use his sword to kill, but to prove his identity. Since he couldn't send his divine sense over, he could only use such a crude method to ensure that he wouldn't miss out on his companions. It was better than flying over, as it was easier to put himself in danger. The flying sword in his hand had a unique distinguishing property, so he didn't have to worry about people not recognizing it. Sure enough, when the sharp killing intent of his flying sword slashed over, that person actually stopped. He was a smart person and knew that the flying sword was not here to kill him. The two of them began to approach cautiously. They were so close that they could communicate with each other using their spiritual senses, but they were still outside their own safety boundaries. The sound of the river came from afar. "Is it senior brother Lu? Little brother Kawamori? The one that you kicked earlier?" Lu Xiaoyi laughed and scolded, "You're such a cunning person. How dare you trick me with lies? Are you suspecting that I'm a holy spirit in disguise? What he kicked was the black corpse, not Hiqian. Therefore, this guy's casual words were actually a trap. They were all smart people who valued their lives very much. Hiqian then came closer and laughed. Senior brother Liu, don't blame me. My life is more important. Even if it's my master, I might still give it a try. Lu Xiaoyi was very serious. Do you mean that holy spirits have the ability to imitate a human's body? Hiqian nodded. I also heard rumors that holy spirits are good at all kinds of imitations. Just from the appearance and breath, it's impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. Of course, deep-level things like the methods of Taoism can't be copied. They can only learn to be specious. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. This was a little troublesome. How can we find this thing in the first place? Just by feeling? Or does your anchor chain Taoism have special methods in this regard? Hiqian shook his head. There's no need for special methods. After all, this kind of existence is a special case. No Taoism in the cultivation world would create a set of methods just because of a special case. In fact, it's not difficult to crack it. If we know it in advance, we just need to communicate with the code. If we don't know it, then no method will work. Lu Xiaoyi looked serious. So, between you and me, I'm afraid we'll have to try it out first. I've heard that the anchor chain Taoism is mysterious and unpredictable. I've always wanted to try it out. Today, I'm here to experience it. Hiqian didn't refuse. Cultivators had to be serious and cautious like this. Since there was time and opportunity, it was better to be at ease with each other. Only by knowing each other's details could they really trust each other. In the future, they might be able to find out the possible infiltrator at the right time, no matter what method they used. The two of them had a congenial conversation. Then, they stretched out their hands. Lu Xiaoyi's sword was merciless. Hiqian's Taoism was marvelous. After dozens of moves, they had a good understanding of each other. They had fought before when Lu Xiaoyi had just arrived and suppressed everyone. For cultivators like them, a short fight was enough to remember a lot of things. Now that they had a try, they could distinguish the real from the fake. Since they had trust in each other, it was much easier to talk and do things. Lu Xiaoyi reminded, originally, the safest solution would be for the two of us to act together. But as you know, this space isn't that big, but it isn't that small either. The chances of meeting others when we act together are purely based on luck. And I don't think we have much time to slowly find everyone. So, Hiqian nodded, I understand. If we act separately, the chances of meeting others will increase by 50%. I think so too, especially that sacred spirit. If we work together, it will definitely not appear in front of us. Lu Xiaoyi praised inwardly. It was needless to say that cultivators from large domains had great foresight. Even if the sacred spirit was praised as a god by the outside world, it still dared to face it alone. This showed that it had a Taoist heart. When we meet that thing, we might as well make a big commotion. This way, we can support each other. Also, when we meet other people, we must be careful. Don't be careless, even if it's your master. Hiqian nodded. Of course. The one I should be most wary of now is my master, because he's the closest person to me and the one who can make me lose my guard the most easily. So, what's our secret code? It has to be special, the kind that's not easy to guess. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. This kind of thing was not difficult for him. In my hometown, there's a doctor named Hua Tuo. He likes to use scalpels the most. Our secret code is Hua Tuo's 3 strings. Hey, this head of yours is going to be cut open. Chapter 1577. Hiqian was confused, but it was true that no one would be able to guess it. So he came up with another idea. There's another possibility. We have suspicions but can't be sure. Should we also arrange a code for them? Let them feel at ease and think that they've gained our trust? Then when we gather together, they won't be able to escape. Hiqian's brain was very good, and he was very considerate. The space they were in was the home ground of the strange mountain holy spirits. Needless to say, coming and going freely was the most basic convenience of home ground. Even if someone as strong as Lu Xiaoyi might be able to repel the holy spirits, it would be more difficult to kill or capture them. Therefore, He Qian's idea was that if he encountered such a suspicious person, he would pass on another set of code words. This way, the others would know what was going on once they heard it, and they would be on guard against it. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. That's right. In my hometown, there's a general named Cao Cao. He's suspicious and jealous. Why don't we use Cao Cao's 3 strings? Bullsh *T, drag it out and kill it. He Qian was dumbfounded. What kind of weird hometown was this? What kind of nonsense is this? But there was one good thing, no one would be able to guess it. The two of them had already made up their minds. They wished each other good luck and each chose a direction to take action separately. Their goal was to connect everyone together before the saint spirits made their move. It was not entirely to save anyone, but to kill the host saint spirits. A holy spirit that could perfectly mimic itself was very scary. For Lu Xiaoyi, there were only 3 people he could test by fighting. The vicious duo and He Qian. He didn't even fight with the 3 cups, let alone the other 6 cultivators. He wasn't too worried about himself. If this thing dared to attack him, he could only fight with his bare hands. What he was worried about was that until now, they still didn't fully understand the stone's intention. Was it for the blood sacrifice? Or something else? He hated this kind of situation the most. He couldn't fight freely and was restrained everywhere. He couldn't distinguish between friend and foe. He continued to move quickly, and in the meantime, he encountered another aura passing by in the distance. When he wanted to get closer, he quickly left. It seemed that the other party was deeply wary of him, which was human nature. If he didn't deliberately chase after him, there would be more misunderstandings. For someone who didn't even dare to come into contact with him, there was no reason for him to help him. If he wasn't unyielding and irresponsible, he would be swallowed up by the cruel cultivation world sooner or later. The order of the space was getting more and more chaotic. It was as if countless tiny spaces were about to collapse at any moment. Under such circumstances, not only was it difficult for one's divine sense to reach far, even spells and flying swords were beginning to be affected. Due to the shattering of the tiny spaces, one's vision was also becoming fragmented. It was as if a group of mortal martial artists were having a night fight in a dark hall. Because he was moving recklessly, a few moments later, his sharp senses detected a trace of abnormality in the tangled and complicated environment. It seemed that there was a battle going on. He followed the trail, and soon, the aura became clear. He couldn't determine who was dead because the aura of the two was very unfamiliar. However, he had his own methods. With a flash of sword light, a sword river surged and instantly enveloped the two's battlefield. In his opinion, if they were on his side, they would definitely stop because the cultivators here had all seen his sword aura river. It couldn't be replicated. If they didn't stop, it meant that they might be a sacred spirit. Sure enough, under the sword aura river, one of the perfected cultivators with a higher realm immediately stopped, but the one with a lower realm was struggling in vain. With Lu Xiaoyi's help, the perfected cultivator released his divine sense. "Senior brother Lu, it's me. Quickly come over and see what's going on." It was a perfected cultivator from another satellite. Lu Xiaoyi had seen him before. He had no problem because he was familiar with Lu Xiaoyi's flying sword. Moreover, a perfected cultivator was having a hard time fighting against a Yuanying. Calling him a sacred spirit was overestimating him. The other cultivator was also a familiar face. He was a Yuanying cultivator and a Koan cultivator. She had already stopped resisting because she could barely hold on when the perfected cultivator attacked. However, when the new perfected cultivator attacked with his flying sword, her defense was immediately stripped away. A flying sword was pressed against her forehead, so she didn't dare to act rashly. She wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid of dying for no reason. The bad news was that she had no room to struggle in front of this person. The good news was that she was very familiar with this person. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and removed his flying sword. He asked with concern, "Why, Jean?" What's going on? Did your elders see that the number of blood sacrifices wasn't enough, so they started to attack their own people? Huai-Jin calmed herself down. She had a good impression of this swordsman and knew that he was a decent person. She just didn't know if he would believe her words. It was indeed hard to believe. For example, the perfected cultivator just now didn't believe her at all and only wanted to take her down. She didn't hesitate. This was the only thing she could do after entering. Thus, she told him everything she knew. She didn't hide anything because hiding anything now would bring danger to everyone. Lu Xiaoyi listened quietly and didn't say anything. He looked at the perfected cultivator. What do you think? How did you meet? Who made the first move? The perfected cultivator was bitter. I made the first move. Because I saw her. It's not that I suspect she's a sacred spirit, but that she's from Strange Mountain's orthodoxy. What she said just now, she also said to me before, but I can't tell if it's true or not. Thus, I want to capture her and let everyone decide. Senior brother Lu, you have to be careful. She's not the only one who came in, including old Shi. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Things had become more troublesome. Possession was harder to distinguish than blending in. After a certain period of time, the person who was possessed would completely become the previous person, possessing his memories, abilities, and even orthodoxy. As long as he didn't say anything, who would be able to tell? Even smashing open his skull and looking into a sea of consciousness might not be able to tell. Their previous judgment was that it was a blood sacrifice. In order to achieve the fusion effect, the cultivator's life had to be sacrificed. Thus, the prerequisite for all precautions was to guard against sneak attacks. But now, it seemed that sneak attacks still existed, but the goal wasn't a blood sacrifice, but a possession. There has to be a basis to judge the situation. I think she's telling the truth. Lu Xiaoyi looked at the perfected cultivator. The perfected cultivator nodded. Actually, this judgment wasn't hard to make. He had never treated this woman as a hidden sacred spirit. Lu Xiaoyi quickly made his decision. Alright, since that's the case, the best solution now is to gather everyone. We need to split up and inform everyone. The space is chaotic and we can't pinpoint the exact location. But there's one thing everyone can feel. The time limit is 4 hours. Everyone should gather at the location of the collapse. Chapter 1578. The perfected cultivator hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Lu Xiaoyi was relieved. Now it seems that the fusion between the Holy Spirit and the spiritual substance is far from perfect. Otherwise, the spiritual substance wouldn't need to go through so much trouble to drag the three from Strange Mountain into its trap and collapse its own space. There's no need for that at all. Its purpose is to create chaos. If it has the ability of the Holy Spirit, would it need to go through so much trouble? So don't be afraid, just fly as fast as you can. It can't face the perfected cultivator directly. But I have to remind you, don't fight with others, especially Huishi. Although this thing can't take over your body directly, it can take advantage of you when you're injured in battle and your strength is greatly reduced. The perfected cultivator nodded. The swordsman's judgment was very sharp. They didn't have any better ideas now. The code words were meaningless. After taking over someone's body, no secrets could be hidden anymore. Taking over someone's body was almost impossible to solve. The only thing they could count on was time, before the Holy Spirit completely inherited the person's memories. The two separated again. Lu Xiaoyi brought Huai-Jin and continued to circle around. Huai-Jin said weakly, I can actually go and inform the others. Lu Xiaoyi refused.
How?
How many people will believe you? What if a fight breaks out and the Holy Spirit takes advantage of it? Plus, you're still under suspicion. Maybe that thing will take over your body and pretend to be pitiful to pass the test? Huai-Jin was speechless and a little annoyed. But she knew that the swordsman was probably trying to protect her. If there was no other choice, the Holy Spirit would definitely choose the weakest to take over first. The four of them were the best targets. But she still wasn't convinced. If I'm the Holy Spirit in disguise, you're the one who should be most careful. Lu Xiaoyi sneered. It's not that stupid. Among the 14 of us, I'm the only one it doesn't dare to take over. It knows very well. Huaijin thought for a while and was still curious. Why did you choose to believe me at the first moment? Didn't you think that I'm the Holy Spirit soul? Lu Xiaoyi glanced at her. You want to hear the truth? Huaijin said, I want to hear it. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Because the world of cultivators is essentially a world of power. What was the greatest wish of a soul that had been suppressed for hundreds of thousands of years? He was a man of honor, not only in terms of status, but also in terms of power and realm, including the position on the bed. Huaijin turned her head away angrily. She wanted to retort that women could also invert heaven and earth, but these words were ambiguous. The more she said, the more unbearable it would be. She might as well not say it. Sure enough, the more serious a person was, the more promiscuous they were, and the more worthless they were. After a long time, she also realized that if this dragged on, the possibility of everyone escaping together was very high. At most, a strange thing would sneak into the group. Then you won't let Martial Uncle off? Lu Xiaoyi disagreed. Everyone has to be responsible for their own actions. No matter what your original intention was, what others saw was the result. What kind of result do you think your martial uncle should have? Everyone should be merciful and let the elderly off this once? Then he made him think that it was the same as his research on the Tao realm, where it was fine to make a mistake once and he could start over again. Is there an end to it? Do you have to see blood, the blood of many people, to teach a person the right idea? I know what you want to say. Martial Uncle is not a bad person. He is usually kind to people. It's just that after doing research for so long, his brain has become a little stubborn. A great evil person may not be able to do great evil, thinking that everyone is guarding against him. The worst are those who do evil unintentionally. It's really impossible to guard against them, stabbing the sky with one stab. You can't blame him, and you have to forgive him.
Why?
Seeing that the woman was speechless, he reminded her, only the blood sacrifice. It was his idea, right? What else is there to say? Huaijin was silent. She understood the reason, but after all, he was her martial uncle. Some things could not be cut off. In the end, Lu Xiaoyi comforted her. It's my personal principle that I have to bear the responsibility. But whether to expand the hatred to the sex power, you have to be careful. It's the same for you. Sacrificing yourself for the greater good is the way the cultivation world exists. If you don't want to lose anything, you may lose everything in the end. It's cruel, but it's also very practical. This is the cultivation world. While flying around, Lu Xiaoyi and Bai Guang met a few more cultivators, including Bai Guang and 2 cultivators from another satellite. Just like the previous time, they explained the situation and scattered people to gather. What worried him the most was that, based on what these people had seen, experienced, or felt, a fight was inevitable. The old Daoist sure played a very bad role in this. He always wanted to explain everything to the people he met, but instead, he caused a fight because none of the cultivators who had been tricked into coming here were magnanimous enough to forgive him. If there was a fight, there was a possibility that that thing could take advantage of it. Can you tell me about the Holy Spirit of your strange mountain? The more detailed, the better. Anyway, this thing can no longer be the treasure of your sect after this change. Huaijin thought about it and knew that this was also the truth. There was nothing to hide. The so-called Holy Spirit is the name of our strange mountain. Maybe the outside world doesn't think so. As a soul body, it originated from a postnatal young god spirit treasure upper realm that had failed and destroyed its treasure body and was now a soul body drifting about. It's impossible to know how Strange Mountain got it, but for thousands of years, it has established a very deep relationship with the cultivators of Strange Mountain. As a spirit treasure that failed to become a half-immortal, it has many things that human beings can't compare with. Its strength is also very strong. In Strange Mountain, where there are no young spirit cultivators, it's not an exaggeration to call it a holy spirit. He sighed. Spirit treasures are different from human beings, but they also have something in common. After losing its life treasure, the strength of the Holy Spirit, yuan, is actually declining. It's just that the speed of decline is particularly slow compared to human beings. We have been trying our best to delay the decline of its strength. It can't be said that there is no effect, but it is indeed not great. We have found a variety of bodies for it, all kinds of spirit treasures, all kinds of weapons, all kinds of heaven and earth treasures. Unfortunately, Yuan is not interested in them. We know that it misses its original treasure, but for a spirit treasure of that level, even if it is acquired, where can we find an identical one? Huaijin shook his head gently. Sherba Baosher is the person in charge of taking care of Yuan in this generation of Strange Mountain. This care has been over for more than 1,000 years, and they know each other very well. In Strange Mountain, no one can rely on the Holy Spirit like Sherba Baosher. It is also because of this that Sherba Baosher was able to persuade Yuan to fuse with a space treasure like the Void Crown. But Sherba Baosher's mistake was that he shouldn't have added a trace of human soul during the fusion. As a result, after all his planning, he made a wedding dress for someone else. It is also destined, and there is nothing he can do. Chapter 1579. What kind of abilities do sacred spirits have? Lu Xiaoyi was very concerned about this. This was the essence of a swordsman because in the end, they still had to rely on their fists to solve problems. Huaijin thought for a moment and said apologetically, regarding a Yuan's abilities, I can only say that I've heard rumors in the mountain. Because at my level, I've never had the chance to directly come into contact with the sacred spirit. First, there's the mimicry. A Yuan can exist in any form in the world, at least from the surface. It's absolutely lifelike. As for the deeper level, it depends on how deep one's understanding of the orthodoxy is. For example, for our strange mountain, if a Yuan disguises himself as a strange cultivator, I'm afraid that even people like us won't be able to tell the difference. Of course, if he wants to disguise himself as an unfamiliar swordsman like you, he'll be exposed as soon as he makes a move. Secondly, there's the spiritual attack. As a former sun god hornet and an acquired spiritual treasure, its spiritual power is the cornerstone of all its powers. Therefore, almost all of its forms of attack will revolve around spiritual power. Lastly, there's the Tao realm. Yuan's original body is actually a space treasure, and its level is even higher than the levitation crown. This is why the body that Sherba found for it must also be a space treasure. You also know that things like space treasures are really hard to find in the cultivation world. There's no direction, and you can only rely on luck. For tens of thousands of years, our strange mountain hasn't found a treasure that can truly replace its original body. This void crown is considered to be on the same level, and it might be because Yuan finally agreed to refine his body. Lu Xiaoyi tried his best to find clues from all the information. He always felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed, but because of the lack of information, he couldn't make a judgment. In fact, all of this didn't have much to do with him. As long as he didn't blame Huaishir for pulling him into the space treasure, when the space dissipated and he left the Ferris wheel, all of this would naturally have nothing to do with him. But human beings are always inquisitive, and in the case of strange and confusing events, every man is the best detective. There was still some time left for him to stay here, and he could not afford to just sit there and do nothing. He would just treat it as solving an IQ problem. Do you have anything to tell me about the living habits, personalities, behaviors, preferences, and so on of the Holy Spirits? Huaijin smiled awkwardly. This is also my first time coming into contact with the Holy Spirit, Yuan. I never had the chance to do so before. As for its habits, you also know that it was once a spiritual treasure, not a human being. What hobbies could it have? Boredom was their nature, wasn't it? We've been out for so long this time, but I haven't heard it say a single word. It's just a piece of wood, the kind that doesn't have any vitality. Lu Xiaoyi changed the topic. Do you have anything to say about your martial uncle's stone-hugging? Do you think his actions this time are normal?
What kind of person was he?
Dao realm madman? Research genius? Eccentric? Unreasonable? No friends? Huijin shook her head. It's not as bad as Senior thinks. Although I don't agree with Martial Uncle's actions this time, it doesn't mean that I can freely slander Martial Uncle's past. Martial Uncle has very little contact with us because he doesn't have any disciples. But he's a warm-hearted person. While taking care of the Holy Spirit, Yuan, he almost always grants the requests of his disciples. Especially when it comes to Tao realm learning, he almost never hides anything. So his popularity is not as bad as you think, but rather, he's widely known in the strange mountain. This is also the reason why Senior Brother and I accepted the order to follow him. As for Martial Uncle's actions this time, this is what I find the most strange. It's indeed not like Martial Uncle's usual behavior. He's obsessed with Tao realm research and rarely cares about the grudges of the sect outside. Moreover, Martial Uncle is not a person who likes to fight. He definitely has strength, after all his cultivation level is there, but Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. The ominous black and white duo has a grudge with the strange mountain. It seems that a few days ago, they even attacked the people of the strange mountain. Then, did these killed cultivators have a particularly close relationship with your Martial Uncle? Did they make him very angry, so he uncharacteristically acted so heavily? Huijin was also very confused. Martial Uncle is a cultivator who has lived for almost 4,000 years. How could he have any relatives? And no disciples. And I've never heard of any friends despite the difference in age, so I also find it very strange. Martial Uncle is not a person who is full of vigor, so why did he do such a cruel thing? Without the permission of the higher-ups of the sect, he mobilized the Holy Spirit, Yuan, and set a trap on the Ferris wheel. It's not only to take revenge on the ominous black and white, but also to kill innocent people like you. I don't understand this, either. Could it be that he has reached a dead end in space research, so he deviated from his original direction? But at the last moment, Martial Uncle still listened to our advice and ordered the Holy Spirit, Yuan, to stop the plan. But at this time, the Holy Spirit has been controlled by the human spirit and will no longer listen to us. Lu Xiaoyi nodded and tried hard to digest the information he got, hoping to find the most important thing from it. Is it very difficult to find possession? Huijin asked cautiously. Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. First of all, I don't know much about possession. After all, it's not the specialty of my orthodoxy. However, according to the few records about it in the world of cultivation, possession doesn't mean much. Because if this is the path to the great Tao, then every high-level cultivator will choose this path when they reach the end of the road. If so, the world of cultivation will be in chaos. Of course, if it's the soul of an acquired spiritual treasure, only God knows what's the difference. He looked at the woman and said seriously, I've always thought that no matter if it's a mortal or a cultivator, the cornerstone of the relationship between people is mutual respect. I can't beat someone until their 3 souls leave their body and 7 spirits leave their body just because they might be suspicious. This isn't something a cultivator should do. But if we don't use violence and only rely on deduction, in fact, time is on the side of that thing. As time goes by, that thing will integrate more and more deeply with other people's memories until we can't get the reason why. Huijin was very sharp. You mean that the human spirit has succeeded? Lu Xiaoyi snorted. It's just a guess. If he's smart enough, he won't try to eat you all in one go. Instead, he'll start from the nascent soul stage. Do you think there's anyone like the 4 of you who can resist his forceful possession? That's why I've been asking them not to fight so easily, because I'm afraid that thing will take advantage of the situation. In the chaos, no one knows what's going on between each other, who's lying, who's hiding. Humans are so complicated. Even if they're innocent, for some inexplicable reason, they can lie for no reason. Chapter 1580. Lu Xiaoyi and Bai Qian didn't find anything else. For hours later, when they arrived at the origin of the space collapse, they finally saw traces of people. He Qian looked at him carefully. Hua Tua. Lu Xiaoyi laughed and scolded. He's not impersonating. He's possessing. What's the use of those code words? not to mention 3. Even 10 will be answered clearly. He Qian was very bored. Soon, everyone gathered together. Lu Xiaoyi counted. There were a total of 9 people present. Of the 11 who were framed, only 7 came back. The other 2 were Huaijin and Yanli, the 2 Yuanying from Strange Mountain. The only difference between them was that one was intact, while the other had a bloody nose and a swollen face. Of the 4 people floating outside, one was old Taoist Hugging Shur, another was old Taoist Sankup, and there was also a true monarch and a Yuanying. They were all from another satellite. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. The old folks are really good at playing hide and seek. He Qian smiled bitterly. The older they are, the more afraid they are of death. That's why they hid well. Except for Hugging Shur, we didn't meet the others. Old Taoist Hugging Shur relied on the fact that he once presided over the Void Crown, so he came into contact with many battles. None of us were able to catch him. Lu Xiaoyi asked, "Who fought with him?" He Qian answered, "Many people. Me, Black Corpse, White Light, and 2 true monarchs." Lu Xiaoyi was very sharp and found the problem. He's lucky to have met many people. With his experience of presiding over the Void Crown, it's not difficult to hide from you. But now he's the one who meets the most frequently. What does this mean? White Light pondered and said, "He did it on purpose." I have the same feeling. What's the purpose? On the surface, is it to tell each of us that the Holy Spirit is out of control? That seems to make sense. He Qian sneered. There may be other deeper meanings. For example, using the chaos of battle to create an opportunity for something to possess. The Black Corpse laughed involuntarily. Then, are we all suspected of being possessed? If that's the case, I don't think I can think of a way to prove my innocence. Who has it? Teach me too? This was a bit of a complaint, but it was also human nature. No one was willing to be suspected of being possessed. That would be an insult to one's strength. White Light stopped his brother from complaining. We are indeed suspicious, but we are not the only ones. It seems like there's no way to explain this. He turned to look at Lu Xiaoyi. What do you think, Brother Lu? You are our chosen leader, and I personally believe that no matter who it is here, you will be safe. Lu Xiaoyi was a little surprised. Why? White Light said in a deep voice, I heard that swordsman has a lot of mutual destruction techniques. There are only dead swordsmen. There are no fake swordsmen. I have no other choice but to believe that this legend is true. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Don't believe in legends. Most of them are fake. Since everyone believes in me, I will say 2 things. First, whether it's the holy spirits of Strange Mountain or the human spiritual beings, they are not familiar with the orthodoxy of the sword vein. So, I will show you a little trick later and let everyone judge whether I am a real swordsman. Second, if everyone thinks that I am real, I can enter your sea of consciousness. As long as you let down your divine defense and don't resist, it will only take a moment. I don't want to harm everyone's lives in front of everyone. This is the fastest way. The scene fell into a dead silence. A cultivator's sea of consciousness was the most important place for a cultivator. Not only was it a matter of life and death, but it could also expose many secrets of a cultivator's 1,000 years of cultivation. This was not a forbidden area that could be easily opened. Even the elders and relatives were no exception. He Qian was the first to respond. I am willing to let go of the divine restriction. Instead of being so suspicious, why don't we just do it? Anyway, I am no match for you. It doesn't matter if you see through my secrets. Lu Xiaoyi corrected him. Don't think that I care about your secrets. I have a headache because of my own secrets. Besides, spying is mutual. You are afraid that I will look at you, but I don't want you to look at me. My secrets are much bigger than yours. So big that you will be scared to death. This bickering was actually to ease everyone's minds. The 2 of them were born in a big place. They had broad horizons and extensive knowledge of the sword. Their attitudes were more tolerant, unlike cultivators from small places who treated their secrets as bigger than the sky. In fact, if they really revealed their secrets, it would be a joke. He Qian was a good friend. It was not only in terms of strength, but also in terms of his attitude and judgment. As expected of someone who came from the universe's famous anchor chain, White Light was the second. As a great bandit, he had his ways of being a hoodlum. In fact, to him, he was just a bandit. He was not afraid of the powerful swordsman from the fifth ring. It was much more worthwhile to make friends with him than to offend him. After rampaging through the universe for thousands of years, he still had this bit of knowledge. White Light nodded, and Black Corpse Zhangjiang naturally followed suit. In fact, it was not a sure thing to use one's mental energy to investigate the sea of consciousness. There were many different situations. For example, whose mental energy was stronger, who had more achievements in the application of mental energy, and whose orthodoxy was more inclined towards this aspect. Now that things had developed to this point, whether or not they could see through it was secondary. The key was whether or not they dared to let others see. If they did not dare, it meant that they were guilty. It was a very simple logic. This was also the reason why He Qian was the first to agree. In fact, these primordial spirits were very clear. Swordsman might be very good at killing people, and his mental energy was also very strong. However, to say that he was good at using mental energy was a bit of an exaggeration. It was more likely that this was just a test. Only swordsmen could test it because the others did not have the qualifications to do so. He Qian was unable to prove his strength, and with White Light's background as a Black Corpse bandit, who dared to let them see? As for the others, they could not even touch the edge of it. Next was Huaijin Yanli. They were the ones who wanted to get rid of suspicion the most, so they had no qualms about it. With the beginning, they were still the strongest few. The remaining three were afraid of being suspected, and afraid of being forcefully forced. Therefore, even if they were a little unwilling, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Lu Xiaoyi saw that everyone had agreed and smiled. This was all within his and He Qian's considerations. If they had not discussed this beforehand, they would not have cooperated so well. The purpose was to race against time. After the possession, the longer the mental energy fusion dragged on, the more likely it would be to separate from each other. Until a few years later, no one would be able to sense the split in the person's mental energy other than the person himself. Lu Xiaoyi did not say much. The flying sword on top of his head rushed forward, and millions of sword rays converged into a long sword chi dragon. For a moment, in this chaotic space of the treasure crown, it was as if the universe had just been born, the primordial chaos had been born, and the five Taishang had revolved, going against the chaos. Light and shadow scattered, and there was no distinction between clear and turbid. Finally, it was as if they had reached the end of the universe's birth, and there was an indescribable mass of things. The sword rays dispersed, and the 8 of them were stunned for a moment. Then, they bowed deeply towards Lu Xiaoyi. Obviously, the swordsman was compensating them for looking at their sea of consciousness. This compensation was not light. Regardless of whether it was useful in battle, it would be of great help to a cultivator's understanding of the universe. It was a generous gift. Marvelous. More importantly, a swordsman could have such an understanding of the universe. This made them, who were magic cultivators, feel inferior. This was what really surprised them. Indeed, only extraordinary people could do extraordinary things. Chapter 1581. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and did not say anything. He accepted their salutes, just like how he saluted the cultivators of the fruit platter back at the fruit platter. The great Tao should not be treasured, especially these basic theories. The cultivators of the fruit platter taught him not to let him use it as a trump card, but to spread these ideas. This was the true path of cultivation. Therefore, he did not hide it. This was the bearing a cultivator should have, not something that would become less and less the more it was passed down, and in the end, it would be returned to the heavenly Tao after the person died. This was taught to me by someone else. I'm just giving it away now. There's no need to thank anyone. Being able to pass down these basic things is the best respect for the great Tao. He Qian chuckled. Why don't you have a little more of the others? I feel that it's a little inappropriate for a swordsman to put his energy on the fifth Grand Elder. Something's wrong with you. Seeing everyone's gazes, Lu Xiaoyi rejected straightforwardly. The ability to kill is for the sake of eating. It's not worthy of being elegant. Perhaps someone will see it later. Then are you ready? He Qian cooperated tacitly and was the first to stand up. It was also to calm everyone's hearts. I'll go first. Lu Xiaoyi warned him. Don't think that I'll let down my guard against you just because you're the first. Maybe you're the incarnation of a demon spirit, pretending to be innocent here. As he spoke, he took out a mirror. It was indeed a Tao artifact. He had forgotten which cultivator he got it from. It had the ability to break through illusions, but its effect was actually limited. It was more suitable for environmental application, not for a cultivator's sea of consciousness. Moreover, this thing also required the cultivator to know a certain cultivation technique. How could he know this? It was just a smokescreen. The purpose of his use of this thing was to create a sense of mystery. Dharma cultivators believed in this kind of thing, and it could also conceal his true means, the big bird of the Sparrow Palace. He placed the mirror on his forehead and muttered something. Everyone only saw a faint light flash out of the mirror and instantly enter He Qian's head. In an instant, Lu Xiaoyi suddenly jumped up, and his flying sword flashed out as he shouted, I'll treat you as a demon spirit. How dare you? Everyone realized that something was wrong. Those with quick reactions had already taken out their Tao artifacts and were ready to use their forbidden arts. They pointed their weapons at the stupefied He Qian. Unexpectedly, Lu Xiaoyi's next sentence was, She's actually wearing pink underwear. Where was the gentleness? Where was his dignity? Where is the bottom line? Everyone's eyes widened when they heard this. Only now did they realize that this was a joke. To liven up the atmosphere and turn a very embarrassing and humiliating process into a game, this was also done with good intentions. Only then did He Qian react. He stomped his feet and scolded, What's wrong with me wearing pink underwear? Who is he bothering? In the cultivation world, I have the right to wear whatever I want. Don't think that you're the only one with a sharp sword. If we really fight, I might not be afraid of you. Everyone hurriedly tried to dissuade him. Only then did He Qian let the matter go. Although he was mumbling to himself, he had already made a judgment in his heart. Because of the sudden actions of the swordsman, everyone thought that he was playing with fire and burned himself. Everyone had a look of surprise on their faces, but no one noticed that they were relieved of a heavy burden. Of course, a cultivator's emotions couldn't be so obvious. They were all shrewd people. Even if they didn't show it on their faces, there would still be fluctuations in their aura. For example, if they really thought that they were being possessed by a demon spirit, they would enter a state of nervousness before a battle and their aura would unconsciously become heavier. On the other hand, if they were really being possessed by a demon spirit, they would unconsciously feel relieved and their aura would become more relaxed. Under this sudden change, 3 of them reacted calmly, as if they weren't affected at all. As for the others, their aura became heavier as usual. They couldn't completely base it on this. They could only say that they had a rough idea. Perhaps there really was a drama queen who was more engrossed in acting as someone else than herself? They told the swordsman the result. This was actually still a show between the 2 of them. It's just a joke. Relax, relax. Everyone, don't be nervous. We're all friends here, so just treat it as a game. It's very possible that the demon spirit is among the 5 who didn't make it back yet. Why should we be so nervous? Everyone was speechless. The swordsman's way of doing things was always unexpected. He was always able to make a serious matter seem unserious, causing everyone to be in a mess. Next was white light. Those who believed that they were strong enough would always stand in front. Lu Xiaoyi once again placed the mirror on his forehead, but White Light suddenly waved his hand and shouted for him to stop. Brother Lu, please don't say anything like what little brother Riverfront did, okay? Lu Xiaoyi was surprised.
What?
Old brother White Light is also wearing underwear? The atmosphere finally relaxed. If even the infamous thief from the dozens of universes near the Ferris wheel could be part of the game, what else could the others complain about? Lu Xiaoyi did the same thing. Once again, a faint light flashed, and the game ended. This time, he didn't jump up, didn't shout, and didn't use his flying sword. He just flew in front of Riverfront and whispered in his ear. After that, he flew in front of another true monarch. He was also acting mysteriously. This situation made everyone confused. Was there something wrong with White Light? Was he contacting everyone to make a move? Or was this still a game? Even though White Light was calm and had strong willpower, he still couldn't help but ask. Could it be that there's something wrong with me?
How come I don't know about it?
Brother Lu, you're being so mysterious. You're making people feel uneasy. Lu Xiaoyi spread his hands. I'm hungry. Can I find someone to eat and drink? Brother White, of course there's nothing wrong with you, but you're too hard to serve. You're not willing to talk, and you're not willing to talk either. So should I talk or not? Everyone could see that even if the swordsman was suspicious, he would never turn hostile on the spot. He liked to play dirty. This was a very annoying method, especially for those who had ulterior motives. He would suspect every possible tiny link, desperately trying to cover up every possible mistake he might have made, wishing that he could do it perfectly. Then, he would expose himself in the midst of his efforts to be perfect. How was this observing the sea of consciousness? This is simply a test of your nerves. Those who didn't have ulterior motives wouldn't be affected. However, that thing was troublesome. When faced with such a capricious and unpredictable judge, an invisible pressure would press down on them like a mountain. This swordsman was too scary. Those with weaker personalities would probably collapse on the spot. There were all kinds of methods: normal, abnormal, funny, serious, oppressive, understated. In any case, everyone's sea of consciousness was scanned in a different way. However, everyone had one thing in common. They no longer had the mood to see what the terrifying swordsman was looking at with the mirror. He Qian watched from the side with admiration. A simple demon-revealing mirror was played with so many tricks. This made him, who had always prided himself on his intelligence, feel a little ashamed of his inferiority. He couldn't win with brute strength, but he couldn't play tricks. That was why he became famous in the universe, not him. The heavenly Tao was still fair. Chapter 1582. Very quickly, all 8 of them finished their investigations. Lu Xiaoyi's expression was solemn. Lu Xiaoyi's Sparrow Palace was very mystical. The fated chance he obtained when he was building his foundation was the biggest fated chance he had had in his 1,000 years of cultivation. The wine became more fragrant the longer it was kept. Only when he reached the level of Supreme did he truly understand the significance of the Sparrow Palace and roughly know its origin. It was the noblest phoenix in the world of beasts. Because of its innate superiority, his Sparrow Palace's ability was not only displayed in the phoenix's most proficient destiny. In fact, he didn't seem to have borrowed any power from destiny. What he borrowed was often other aspects. For example, this time, through the Sparrow Palace's giant bird's instantaneous floating in the sea of consciousness, it was completely different from normal people's use of spiritual power. It would cause all external things to have nowhere to hide. This wasn't a method of observation. Lu Xiaoyi didn't have this kind of observation ability. It was just the giant bird's instinct to sweep through the sea of consciousness and discover the mutant form within. In addition, under the various pretenses from before, he had observed the changes in everyone's aura. In just a short 4 hours, no matter how brilliant a soul possession was, it was impossible to be flawless. It was still a biting, but this time it was a real bite. However, it felt very familiar to everyone. If this indecent swordsman stood up at the end and said that the demon's spirit wasn't among them, no one would be surprised. But this time, it was really different. White Light was the last one to be bitten. Lu Xiaoyi felt very regretful. Brother White, you should talk to your brother. We'll seal off the outside for you. You should be very clear about the original cultivator's condition after the possession. It's up to you to decide whether or not to take action. White Light's heart trembled. He knew that this swordsman was telling him that the black corpse Zhangjiang's body had been taken over by another human spirit. Although in terms of strength, he didn't believe that the powerful Zhangjiang would be so easily taken over. Anything could happen in the cultivation world. If something really happened to Zhangjiang and they couldn't investigate, the one who would be in the most danger after leaving this place would be him, who had the closest relationship with Zhangjiang. Brother Liu, this isn't something to joke about. Liu Xiaoyi was very certain. Trust me, it hasn't been long since he took over your body, so there's a limit to how much he can fuse with your memories. Since you're so familiar with each other, there should still be plenty of loopholes to exploit. He took a step back and formed a large circle with the other cultivators that he had already communicated with, leaving only the vicious duo in the center. This was their private matter. To an experienced essence, soul-perfected lord like White Light, there was no need to teach him what to do next. Heqian was very surprised. Senior Brother Liu, are you sure you're not mistaken? I always thought that it was impossible for the few of us to be possessed by the spirit in such a short period of time. I was more inclined towards those who were weaker, or even yuanying. Liu Xiaoyi shook his head. It can't be yuanying. Because in this situation, if he wanted to protect himself, he had to seize the body of at least one true monarch. Just wait and see. The truth will come to light. Kawakami murmured, this is a little scary. Are all true monarchs so weak? Liu Xiaoyi's expression did not relax much, because he actually had a lot of questions. I can be sure that there's a problem with the black corpse, but I still have some doubts. First, how could a human lonely soul that had been imprisoned and purified for many years be able to occupy the body of a powerful primordial spirit in such a short period of time? I don't think that human soul can do this, unless it's not the spirit of the human, but the Holy Spirit of Strange Mountain. Second, it was discovered just like that. Isn't it too simple? The thunder is big, but the rain is small. Is there something that we haven't noticed? Heqian agreed with his suspicion. In fact, our understanding of the situation came from the two yuanying cultivators of Strange Mountain. They are unlikely to lie, but their understanding came from Baisher. So, did Baisher tell the truth? Or is there still something hidden? That human spirit is just an illusion in Baisher's mouth. Does it really exist? I think it's very suspicious. Because whether it's controlling a young spirit soul like the Holy Spirit of Strange Mountain, or a living human cultivator like the Black Corpse, I'm afraid it's beyond its power. Liu Xiaoyi was very willing to communicate with smart people. In the past, there was Qing Xian, and now Heqian's brain was also very sharp. In fact, in simple terms, our opponents are nothing more than these four: the Holy Spirit, the human spirit, the Void Crown, and Baisher. The Void Crown is already self-destructing, so we can ignore it. The human spirit is illusory and has yet to be confirmed. The two most important links in the whole conspiracy, the Holy Spirit and Baisher, seem to be dissociated from the conspiracy, as if they are also victims. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Heqian chuckled. Yes. So I judge that Baisher relied on the fact that he once presided over the Void Crown, so it was easier for him to find people in space than us. He kept provoking us, in fact, to create opportunities for the soul body. Unfortunately, the unlucky one in the end was the Black Corpse. Liu Xiaoyi retorted, maybe there's more than one unlucky one? What if the three of them are in the same group? Find a body for the human spirit, and then find a body for the Holy Spirit. The human spirit was found by me because of its own ability, but the Holy Spirit was hidden deeper? For example, you. Heqian retorted. In biographies and novels, the most likely ultimate villain is usually the one who is least likely to be the presiding person, so it could also be you. At least we admit that we have fought with Baisher, but you don't even dare to admit this. The two of them attacked each other and enjoyed it. This was a game, and to make a game, one had to have the mentality of a game and put oneself in it. Liu Xiaoyi sneered. We will never find Baisher here, because he is the master of this space. So when Baisher is done, We don't need to search anymore to avoid giving them an opportunity. We will wait for the space to completely collapse. After we go out, no one will be able to leave, not only us but also those guys who have been missing. So when the space collapses, the others will stay where they are, while you, Baishur, and I will immediately go out to find them. Hetien agreed. Well, if we don't find them, we won't find the truth. They may think that we caught a soul body and everything is fine. Lu Xiaoyi was very puzzled. It's reasonable for Baishur to hide, but what about your master? Isn't he too irresponsible? He's so old, but he doesn't know how to stand up for himself? He just wandered around in the space. How could he know the news? Why did he have to hide like this? Hetien was very embarrassed. My master. You don't know. He looks calm, but in fact, he is very timid. He doesn't care about anything and doesn't want to get involved in any trouble. He calls it training me, but in fact, he is afraid of trouble. His greatest specialty is hiding. If he really hides, no one will be able to find him. Chapter 1583. There was a change in the center of the circle. The communication between Bai Guang and the Black Corpse had changed from words to a fight. This was Bai Guang's responsibility. In the cultivation world, the definition of possession had always been conceptually vague. It was impossible to cut open the skull to find traces of an abnormal spiritual body, so everything was just speculation. It needed to be confirmed. This was generally done by the closest people, relatives, friends, and elders of the same sect. As a fellow disciple, Bai Guang was actually the one who couldn't tolerate his junior brother being taken over. For others, it had nothing to do with them. No one knew what they would do in the future. Maybe they would turn over a new leaf and become a saint instead of a great thief? Obviously, the two people who had the same little secret could be easily distinguished from each other. With Bai Guang's character, he would rather destroy his junior brother's body than let others take over his body and get away with it. This was the inevitable choice of every cultivator. There was no such thing as being merciful for his junior brother, who was still alive. This was not the way of thinking of cultivators. However, the beginning of this destruction must be done by Bai Guang and not by others. The battle was extremely fierce from the beginning. The two came from the same sect and knew each other well. However, the Black Corpse Zhangzhang's body was a new soul after all. It would take a lot of time to completely master the things in this body. It was not something that could be mastered in just a few hours. What's more, this spiritual body had not fought for nearly 1,000 years. After a few moves, Zhangjiang fell into a disadvantageous position. This further proved the nature of his possession. In a fight between fellow disciples, under normal circumstances, it would take a few days for them to determine the winner and loser. Bai Guang's face was filled with sorrow. They had been fellow disciples for thousands of years. He didn't expect such a result in the end. As a great thief, he didn't die in the war of the universe, but in the end, he had to fight with his own brother. But he had to kill him, because this was the only way to be worthy of his junior brother. Just like if he was possessed, the Black Corpse would do the same. This was their tacit understanding. Stealing the universe was cold-blooded. He didn't want his junior brother to live in such a muddle-headed way. Even if he really got rid of the spiritual body, who knew if there would be any future troubles? Would it happen again at some point in the future? If his soul was damaged, he would become the target of revenge from countless enemies. Compared to the unpredictability of the future, it was better to kill him cleanly now. Therefore, white light showed no mercy. Moreover, he spread the message to the cultivators outside the circle that if the Black Corpse escaped, they did not have to worry about his feelings. They just had to eliminate him completely. However, his attacks were still restrained. The purpose of this restraint was not to save his junior brother's life, but to capture that soul body alive. He had 10,000 ways to imprison this soul body forever, making it live in fear and torment forever. However, the spiritual body was very clear about what would happen to him in the future. He had been tortured by a research-type cultivator like Huaishir for hundreds of years. How could he do it again? Amidst the heavy encirclement, it was already impossible for him to break out. Not to mention that there was more than one rancor like white light outside, there was only one swordsman, and there was no way he could escape. This was because he had personally experienced how terrifying the giant bird was. The only thing it could do was to deliberately hurt this body and use all kinds of excessive methods without regard for the consequences. Seeing this, White Light's eyes were about to split open, but there was nothing he could do. This was the final madness of the soul body. In the end, it used its mana to self-explode, blowing up all the consciousness in the sea of consciousness into pieces, leaving behind a broken body. It still had a chance to live. Its intention was obvious. This idiotic body was left for you to raise, or you could kill your own brother. The cruelty of the cultivation world made Huaijin, who was watching from the side, secretly shocked. No one had died in this conspiracy, which made her feel a little lucky. She always felt that as long as no one died, there would always be room to maneuver. Now, when faced with life and death, it was so decisive. White Light was not that weak. This was the worst situation, but it was also within his expectations. He could only bet that the soul body still had the will to live, so he could find a way to capture it alive. However, if the soul body had the will to die, he could not control the life and death of the soul body in the cultivator's body. You could never control the thoughts, not even the gods. With a wave of his hand, the black corpse's body exploded into particles in the void. This was the end of the cultivator. From now on, there was only one black and white malevolent duo left, completely lonely. There was no sadness. Even if there was, it was only for a moment. The primordial spirit realm had long been able to control their own emotions. Flying back to the front of the crowd, he bowed deeply to Lu Xiaoyi. Fortunately, Brother Lu has sharp eyes. Otherwise, if we let it go, who knows how many human tragedies would happen. White Light has nothing to repay you, but if you need me, I will not hesitate. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Why are you thanking me? It's not over yet. We still don't know where the real culprit is. White Light's eyes flashed fiercely. He appeared to be very calm, but in the end, all his attention was on his brother, so he was not vigilant about other people and things. Now that he heard Lu Xiaoyi's words, he reacted a little. Everyone gathered together and listened to He Qian talk about his guesses, and at the same time, made arrangements for the space. Among the crowd, Huaijin and Yanli listened with cold sweat. Their martial uncle's shrewdness and secrets were far beyond their imagination. Moreover, these true monarchs from the outside world were all resourceful and decisive. None of them were pushovers. In the world of cultivation, those without brains and strength would not be able to get involved. The plan was very simple, but the more complicated it was, the easier it was for something to go wrong. In fact, everyone gathered here and did not move, ensuring that these people would not be invaded, and only waiting for the moment when the void crown was completely broken and the space collapsed. After the space collapsed, everyone in the space would be thrown out of the space, but the distance between them would not be too far. When their divine senses recovered, they would be able to find the traces of the 5 people at the first moment. Everyone present was divided into 5 teams. Lu Xiaoyi, White Light, and He Qian formed a single team, each chasing in one direction. The remaining 5 people were divided into 2 teams, 3 teams, and 2 teams, chasing in the other 2 directions. The purpose was to really gather everyone and screen them again, so that the real culprit would not be let go, no matter if it was holding Shi or the Holy Spirit of the strange mountain. It was not difficult to track them down because there were 2 nascent soul stage cultivators from another satellite among them. It would be easy to track them down. With Sanbei's cautious temperament and his experience, it would not be a problem to track them down. The key was the stone hugger and the Holy Spirit. Lu Xiaoyi was very sure that the soul body that took over the black corpse was not the Holy Spirit, because it did not show a trace of the soul body of the young god until it died. The future battle was between these 2 guys, and it was time to uncover the mystery. It was almost over. Chapter 1584. They did not have to wait for long. The spatial collapse of the Void Crown was accelerating. It was a pity that such a precious spatial Taoist instrument had become a sacrifice. Before reaching the critical point, Lu Xiaoyi reminded them, "Don't chase too far after we go out, and don't think that there must be 5 directions. Although 5 people have not returned, it is very likely that some of them have died in the space. It's just that we don't know. Although this place is not small, we will not be thrown out too far. Our spiritual senses are enough to sense, so there is no need to expand the range. If any of us find that the opponent is exceptionally difficult to deal with, don't force it, because there may be a young spirit's soul living in there. Wait for support, it will be very soon." Everyone nodded silently. This dimensional space was in turmoil. They had thought that it was a research trip, but it had turned into a journey of desperation. Although the loss was not great, it seemed that the real mastermind behind the scenes had not appeared yet. At the last moment, the space was torn apart, and the entire Void Crown space suddenly collapsed, merging with the dimensional space outside. At this time, it depended on whose reaction was faster, and who could wake up from the spatial oscillation first. Lu Xiaoyi had been using the power of the Sparrow Palace to protect his spirit, so after the space was suddenly released, he was the first to spread out his spiritual sense, and at the same time issued a stern warning. "If there is nothing unusual, stay where you are, otherwise you will be killed without mercy." This was shouted to the 5 people. He did not chase after them immediately, but stayed for a very short time to see who was running, and who stayed with a clear conscience. There were only fluctuations of qi activity in 2 directions. One of them was escaping quickly, and the other was not moving. Lu Xiaoyi, Bai Guang He-Qian, and the other 2 jumped and chased after them, while the other 5 ran in the other direction. The 3 of them ran at full speed and immediately saw the gap. Lu Xiaoyi was far in the lead, with Bai Guang in the middle, and behind him was He-Qian. Although He-Qian's orthodoxy was profound, he was still a Yin spirit, and was still inferior to Bai Guang's primordial spirit, but the gap was not big. With Lu Xiaoyi's current speed, anyone below the Yang spirit level would not be able to escape if they were targeted by him. Moreover, this moving qi did not seem to be good at flying. His speed was not even comparable to the 2 in front of Bai Guanghe. Lu Xiaoyi was the first to arrive. With a sweep of his sword, the people in front could not escape. 2 people came into view. The white-haired Bao Shi was carrying a person. It was one of the monarchs among the 5. He looked like he was still alive, but he was being restrained. It was unclear how heavy he was. Boulder stopped and looked at the swordsman in despair. Then he saw Baiguang and Kawakami behind him. He knew that he had lost. It wasn't because his struggle was meaningless, but because no matter how many plans he had, he still had to resort to violence in the end. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have set up a trap. The 3 of them slowly surrounded it cautiously, because the opponent they were about to face was in existence at the level of Yang God. Whether it eventually appeared as a human or a spiritual body, a Yang God was a Yang God. Who's bolder? Who is the Holy Spirit? Lu Xiaoyi asked coldly. There might be a lot of helplessness in this, but this was not a reason to act recklessly. Bao Shi looked at him. Although it had only been a few days, his hair and beard were all white, and he looked very old. "You're the swordsman who ruined my plan in the end?" He didn't care about the old Taoist's counterattack. "You're wrong. It wasn't me who ruined your plan, but your plan that was full of loopholes. Do you think you can get away with it without me around? You'll still fail. Look at the monarchs around me. Do you think they grew up eating shit for thousands of years? Old man, reading books is a good habit. It's not a problem to read professional books, but there must be a problem if you read too many biographies and do things based on them. A big problem. After all, the world of cultivation is a place where brute strength is the most important thing. You've got it all wrong. Let me ask you one more time. Who is bolder? Who is the Holy Spirit?" The old Taoist still didn't answer. Instead, he was very interested in his mistakes. Where did I go wrong? Lu Xiaoyi still respected the old. One of the first principles of doing bad things and scheming is to try not to involve strangers when there is no one around. Look, you've got everything. You came to the Ferris wheel to play tricks in front of everyone. These people grew up playing tricks. When you were studying the state of Tao, they were studying people. In the world of cultivation, what's mine is mine. There's no reason to take it out for others to see. Unless I lie down, the treasures will be destroyed with me. This is how cultivators do things. They don't show off their treasures to everyone. From that moment on, you've become the person with evil intentions in everyone's heart. People are creatures. Once they're suspicious, it's hard to get rid of it. There's no need to go into the details, right? Over and over again, there are only these few key points. Where else can you lead us to? One last question. Who is Boulder Hua? Who is the Holy Spirit? Lu Xiaoyi was very patient. Firstly, he wanted to know the root of the problem. Secondly, he was waiting for someone. Just like now, the other 5 people flew over with 3 cups. The old Taoist, 3 cups, was very tactful. He shouted, "I'm also suspicious. Don't worry about my face." Boulder sighed. He knew that if he didn't face the problem directly, he would have to face it directly. I'm Boulder, and I'm also the Holy Spirit. Huai Jinyan, who came over from afar, opened his eyes wide, and his face was full of disbelief. I've been taking care of the Holy Spirit for almost 2,000 years. I don't have any relatives. If I must have one, my relative is the Holy Spirit Yuan. Yuan has always been very resistant to having a new body. For thousands of years, this strange mountain has tried countless methods, but they all failed. They thought that this was Yuan's temperament, but it's actually wrong. It just doesn't want a lifeless body, and it doesn't want the body of those strange monsters or void beasts. What Yuan really wants is a human body. Boulder smiled bitterly. Yuan has been with humans for a long time. It also knows that such a request is actually very excessive, because it needs at least the body of a monarch for it to merge with. For humans, this is unacceptable. Only I slowly understood its intention after a long time of contact. But unfortunately, I can't help it. First, the human's concept of cultivation doesn't allow me to do this. Second, my ability is not enough to completely control a monarch. So it's been dragging on. Yuan is getting weaker and weaker, and I'm getting older and older. I'm so old that if I don't solve this problem, I won't have time to do anything for it. So, I targeted the most notorious black and white villains in dozens of nearby universes. They're strong enough in their prime and have a lot of killing. These are all my criteria for targets.
So, I came up with this plan.
I used the void-leaving crown to attract their attention. Chapter 1585. P.S. Today is the last day of the double. Your monthly votes are the most efficient. Thank you for your support. Thank you, everyone. When I fused with the Void Crown, I did add in a human soul, spirit guide. Although it was ambitious, it was far from enough to contend against Yuan. So, you all think that Yuan or I are the mastermind behind all of this, and there's a certain reason for that. Huaishir was a little tired, mainly because of his heart. Originally, my purpose was to pull the black and white villains in, and I didn't want to drag everyone down with me. But Yuan told me that it would be easier for it to use its mimicry to attack with more people. Only 2 lone thieves, both of whom were primordial soul immortals, had a small chance of success. I admit that I didn't think carefully enough and thought that this was Yuan's idea. But I didn't expect that Yuan had already colluded with the human spirit guide in the process of fusing with the Void Crown. Both of them wanted a human immortal's body. Huaishir sighed. The human spirit guide hoped that more cultivators would go in, so that it would have a choice. First, it would take the Yuanying, then the immortal. Yuan was interested in the body of the younger immortal with more potential. Everyone present knew who the younger immortal with more potential was. It was none other than the 2 Yin gods from the big world, Lu Xiaoyi and Heqian. So, in the chaos, the human spirit guide achieved its goal with our help, but Yuan was in trouble. Creatures that were not of the same species couldn't be sure that they would succeed. So the human spirit guide succeeded, but A Yuan, who is more powerful, couldn't. After killing Immortal, we had to stop and think about how to succeed. In the end, the human spirit guide attracted your attention, and we caught another Immortal to continue our research. Huijin shouted, "Uncle, what did you promise us? You knew that it was wrong, but why did you slide further and further down the wrong path? Innocent people were killed one after another. Where did you place your sect?" Huaishir smiled bitterly. I know. But if you spend 2,000 years with a soul, you have already regarded it as the most important existence in your life. Even if it made a mistake, how could you bear to destroy it? What else can you do except to make a mistake and fight for an acceptable result? Putting righteousness before family? After trying here and there, I realized that the most suitable human for it was me. Baoshi looked up at the sky and sighed. I'm already old. I can't go up to Yang's spirit, and I don't have hundreds of years to live. If it wants to use my body, then take it. But it still can't adapt. Even though it's in my body, it's still asleep most of the time and rarely awake. That's why I'm telling you all this now. But if we enter a battle, it will definitely awaken. I don't know if you are willing to fight with a former Yang spirit. If you are, then pretend that I didn't say anything. If you don't want to, maybe I have a solution. Lu Xiaoyi said in a deep voice. Why don't you tell me? Baoshir's hair and beard stood on end. I only have myself to blame for what I've done. My death is not to be regretted. You don't need to do anything. I will end myself. However, my recklessness this time has let down my sect. I'm afraid it will bring endless trouble to the sect. If I end my own life and take a Yuan with me in the sea of consciousness in exchange for your forgiveness, I don't know if you are willing to let bygones be bygones? He Qian was very cautious. How can you prove that A Yuan is sleeping in your body? If this is just an act of yours, then wouldn't all our efforts be in vain? Baoshi nodded. A Yuan is the spirit of space. I will show you its space power later, and the result will be clear at a glance. Now you just need to tell me, are you willing or not? For example, the cultivators from the other satellite, their orthodoxy was not as good as the bizarre mountain, so it was not difficult to bring them along. As for the vicious duo, one of them was already dead. No matter how much the remaining one could do, it would be like pouring a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. In the end, it was still too weak to go against a force. His previous achievements were based on his unpredictability and unpredictability. He had never come face to face with any force. This was not something a space pirate would do. It was a taboo. Therefore, Baoshir's words were actually aimed at two people who were extremely powerful. Since they knew their status, they had to be discerning. After a discussion, several Supremes directly gave the decision to Lu Xiaoyi. Fellow Taoist Lu is the leader of our team this time. We have to finish what we started. We will listen to fellow Taoist Lu's arrangement. White Light felt bitter in his heart. He knew that he could not win against White Light. No matter how he looked at it, his opinion was the most meaningless in this kind of situation. Because he was a lone thief, he had many enemies outside but few friends. In his heart, he did not want to give Baoshi such a chance. It was not that he really wanted to take revenge on the strange mountain, but he did not agree with this way of ending. They should kill him, not let him commit suicide. There was a difference. But he also understood that he could not bear a grudge because of his junior brother's death. There was clearly a safe way, but he insisted that everyone help to kill a young god's spiritual body. Who would be responsible for the damage in the process? He could only accommodate. He rarely made such concessions in his life, and it made him feel sorry for his junior brother. But this step had to be taken because it was useless to insist. In terms of the anchor chain, he was definitely in the same boat as the swordsman. There was no need to even think about it. I will listen to Brother Lu. Bai Guang made a difficult choice. He Qian glanced at his master and saw that his master was happy and content. He Qian had experienced this for almost 2,000 years. He also knew that Baoshir's proposal was the best one, which was to give both sides a way out. Otherwise, if they really solved the problem through fighting, they might not be in the mood to take revenge on the strange mountain. The big domain was not so shallow. This was obviously an individual action, and it was not worth returning to the domain to invite more people. Then, we will also listen to fellow Lu's opinion. Lu Xiaoyi was a little depressed. They all knew how to make excuses, and were unwilling to take responsibility. They pushed everything to him. They were all sly old foxes. In that case, he would not be polite. In that case, I will make an idea. I do not agree with your proposal. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Bao Shi's eyes narrowed.
Why?
This is my own doing, and it has nothing to do with the sect. Fellow Taoist, are you trying to take your anger out on me? Lu Xiaoyi was still calm. I am not interested in your sect. But I am interested in you. You have no right to commit suicide. Because of you, many innocent people have died. Do you know why we can always ruin your plans? Because we follow the nature of the cultivation world. If we can fight, then don't fight. Chapter 1586. White Light was in a good mood. At this moment, he was truly convinced by this swordsman from a bandit's den. It was not because of his strength, but because of his behavior. He jumped up, and the anger that he had accumulated for a long time was released with his attack. So, what if he was a spiritual body of the Sun Spirit? He was not afraid. No matter what others thought, White Light must be at the forefront of this battle. He would only treat it as his own battle. As soon as Lu Xiaoyi said his choice, He Qian immediately understood his intention. This was doubt. He did not believe everything that Bai Shi said. Of course, it was impossible to judge whether it was true or false in a short time. The only way to find the truth was to go against it. Bai Shi did not want to fight. They had to fight. Only then could they break his plan because this old guy was too good at lying. From the beginning to the end, they did not know which of his words was true and which were false. Most of them might be true, but as long as one or two of them were lies, they would be confused and lose their fundamental direction. Violence was the best way to break a lie. It was simple and effective. Therefore, he did not hesitate and rushed forward. For him, he had never fought with a sun spirit, so he was a little excited. Lu Xiaoyi did not immediately start fighting. He did not intend to end the battle quickly because it was easy to destroy Bai Shi's physical body, but it was difficult to completely eliminate the Holy Spirit Ayuan, a spiritual body of the Sun Spirit, and a spiritual body of the Space Spirit was a new topic. The battle in the field was fierce. Bai Guang He Qian's moves were fierce, and he temporarily had the upper hand. But this was just an illusion, because Ayuan had not taken over the body yet. Lu Xiaoyi's fighting intuition was very sharp. He felt that it was better to keep Bai Shi alive than to destroy his physical body in the fastest time. At least he could contain Ayuan's spiritual body. Otherwise, when he lost his physical body and began to face the pure illusory spiritual body, his flying sword would not have many ways to deal with it. He needed to see it clearly. He was watching the enemy here, and old Taoist Sankup could not help but remind him, it's not good to have too many people in this kind of siege. I thought the three of you would be enough. They had to be careful of him borrowing the power of chaos, especially his Tao of space. You should know that the strange mountain's Holy Spirit is even more powerful than the levitation crown. Lu Xiaoyi was shocked. The old man was indeed very experienced. It seemed that he had done this kind of thing many times before. Now, with a glance, he immediately found the problem. Just as he was about to warn the others to stay away, Bao Shi sneered. Suddenly, the space around him changed. Li Kuan's space was a fixed space, but Ayuan's space was a torn space. It was not fixed, and would disappear as time passed. It was during this period that most of the attacks in front of the White Light River missed because it was no longer in the same space. There was no such thing as good or bad. There were countless conditions for using the Tao of space. For example, the main body. Back then, the void-leaving crown had a body, just like how a human had a body and a soul had no body. It was the same kind of technique, but the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. The so-called refining of weapons was not for nothing. The ability of the treasures played an extremely important role. In this regard, the void-leaving crown could establish a fixed space and pull everyone in, but the current Holy Spirit, Yuan, could not do it. This was the reason why one had a body, and the other did not. However, Yuan's Tao of space was above the void-leaving crown. For example, the torn space created purely by his own strength was not something the void-leaving crown could do. The whole space was a little chaotic, and the other cultivators who were watching the battle were also involved. For cultivators, the spirit of exploration was a necessary quality. Facing the danger of the yang spirit and experiencing the torn space was a difficult choice. Considering the number of people on their side, most of the cultivators chose to participate in the battle instead of watching with folded arms, which was also in line with the nature of cultivators. At a time like this, Lu Xiaoyi couldn't force it. Under the gaze of many pairs of eyes, it was basically impossible to take over someone's body during the battle. It was a delicate work. Holding Shi's body moved freely through the torn space, as if he was the spirit of space. His current state was the Holy Spirit Yuan because human cultivators could not understand space to this extent. However, in terms of attack, he was still the same as the Taoism of the strange mountain. Occasionally, he was mixed with some spiritual attacks that belonged to Yuan, which was slightly mediocre. The torn space was also known as the unstable flocculated space in the cultivation world. It was a kind of space that appeared and disappeared at any time. It was a continuous and unpredictable space. It could be understood as an open bounded domain. However, the bounded domain was not dominated by the power of Buddhism, the various states of Tao, and the various bounded domain creatures. Here, there were only countless clouds that appeared and disappeared at any time, flocculated space clouds. The owner of such a bounded domain could use these spatial clouds to attack and defend. For example, when the enemy attacked, the owner could use a cluster of spatial clouds to attract the enemy's attack to an unknown space. Or, the owner could hide in a spatial cloud and appear again after dodging the enemy's attack. In terms of attack, the owner could tear the space where the enemy was standing. Although this kind of spatial tear could not directly hurt the enemy, it could make the enemy feel temporarily uncomfortable when they were forced to enter and exit the torn space. Then the owner could take the initiative to attack. Generally speaking, this kind of spatial barrier had a great advantage in terms of defense and movement, especially in the case of one against many. However, in terms of offense, it was somewhat lackluster. It couldn't produce any substantial offensive effects, and still had to rely on the cultivator's own abilities. This was the basic characteristic of the bounded domain of space. Every innate Tao had its own unique characteristics. There was no Tao that was perfect in every aspect. The Tao of space's characteristic was its extremely ethereal spatial displacement. This was the reason why Lu Xiaoyi did not want to kill Bai Shi quickly, nor did he want him to kill himself. If he killed himself, where would he see such a wonderful spatial displacement? Of course, the biggest reason was that he did not believe that this old man would kill himself willingly. Want to end it? Sure. However, he could not use his own method. He could only use the methods of these victims. Bai Guang's Tao was a rare Tao that cultivated both body and magic. It was more inclined towards the body and meridians. He Qian, on the other hand, had a pure Tao heritage. His instantaneous spell fully demonstrated the foundation of a large world. One was far, and one was close, one was fierce, and the other was restrained. The battle was also very exciting. Bai Guang would often fall into the torn space. It was not a problem for him to rely on his thick skin and thick flesh. He Qian would also cover him from afar. It was a way to forcibly break through the torn space. It was very stupid, but very effective. The essence of a battle was how to use one's strength. If you don't know how to use your own body, then why did you learn the body? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.